Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto is able to learn the incredibly difficult Hiraishin Jutsu during a training trip to Mount Myaboka Part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for Part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Naruto struggled through the forest, barely able to stay on top of his feet. He had just learned the jutsu, and he knew that he had not ironed out all of the kinks, but the amount of chakra he exhausted using it was simply insane. Additionally, having clones use the technique did not really help his chakra stores any. Oh well, he would have time to work out everything in the future. It was over now though. Pain was defeated, he had talked with Nagato. And he was tired. So tired. Next thing he knew, he was no longer on his own 2 feet. He was pretty sure he had fallen forward on accident, finally succumbing to the exhaustion. He really was not sure if he had ever been this tired without passing out before, though was certain he would remember it if he had been. Looking at whomever he had fallen upon, he saw wild silver hair. "Kakashi-sensei?" he asked, his voice sounding weak. "Yo, Naruto. You did it." Naruto nodded into the man's back, for the first time a smile on his face. "I'm proud of you." There was something about the sincerity of Kakashi's voice that made the words sound more important than they ever had before, and Naruto felt like jumping up and down. If only he had the energy. "Thank you, sensei." "Tell me, Naruto. I was incapacitated during the fight. You know, lost on the road of life." Naruto did not need to be told what that meant. He had noticed Kakashi's absence during the intense showdown in the crater, and he felt certain that the man had died because it seemed impossible he would have missed the fight for any other reason, but there simply had not been time to think about it. He had to win the fight, had to confront Nagato. There was no other option. In his mind, he was certain of only one thing during the encounter: either Pain was defeated, or he would die. He would not let himself be captured. "How did you defeat him?" "I did it, sensei. I learned it. The only thing I have connecting me to my father. The Hiraishin. It was the most excruciating training of his life." He had not known it then, but throughout his training trip Jiraiya was teaching him Fuinjutsu that would help him to understand and control the Hiraishin. It had seemed so stupid at the time, but if Jiraiya were still alive, Naruto was sure that he would never doubt the Toad Sage again. He had wanted Jiraiya to teach him cool jutsu instead, or maybe even how to be a sage, but the man made him learn more about Fuinjutsu, and said that the Kyuubi would probably make sage training impossible. When Jiraiya died, Tsunade finally told him about his father, the Yondaime Hokage, Minato Namikaze, and the completed version of the Hiraishin, sealed away beneath the floorboards of the Hokage's desk. At times, it had seemed impossible. The scroll was the largest Naruto had ever seen for one jutsu, and he had to understand every kanji to even start unraveling it. Tsunade suggested he study the jutsu at Mount Myaboku, in order to not be discovered and to have the maximum amount of peace. She had said he would be summoned if needed. With nothing else to do, he dedicated himself to mastering the technique which made his father one of the most feared shinobi in the entire world. The perfect space-time ninjutsu. The difficulty of learning the Hiraishin did not necessarily lie in understanding it. Sure, there was a lot to it, the kanji weaving a tale of a jutsu that bordered the edge of possible and impossible. The amount of chakra theory that was poured into creating the jutsu was astounding to Naruto. He had never really, though the second Hokage was all that cool back in the academy, but his mind changed a bit on that now. The basic concept of the Hiraishin, however, was simple enough: using Fuinjutsu to create a temporary tear in between space and time, and forcing your chakra through the tear, resulting in the user being carried through it, giving the effect of teleportation in an instant. This required a bit of energy at both ends, and while it should be nearly zero if done perfectly, he was still forcing the connection with his own chakra and burning through reserves. The true difficulty of the Hiraishin was in recreation. His father had famously used tri-pronged kunai with only a few simple kanji written on them in order to use the Hiraishin. He wasn't sure if the second did the same. A few kanji written on a piece of paper was a far cry from the enormous scroll, so that meant Naruto needed to find a way to shorten the formula. Unfortunately for him, the jutsu had numerous blood kanji, meaning that the final product would be different for each individual. Luckily, at least, a few of the kunai were stored with the scroll to help guide him, at least a bit. It took 4 days for him to even get through an initial in-depth reading of the scroll, with the Toad Elders forcing him to take breaks to eat and sleep. After that, he began to use shadow clones in order to hasten up the process. He would assign sections for the clones to work on and make sure that they dismissed in a certain order so that he would remember the jutsu as it was written instead of having memories of unrelated chunks of kanji. Even with his help, the Hiraishin proved a harsh beast to tame. When Naruto felt he had a good understanding of the Hiraishin scroll, it became time to shorten it. He had a plentiful amount of kunai and a ton of paper for the task and created shadow clones to allow multiple avenues to be explored at once. Even then, it was incredibly difficult. Using even 100 clones, the task was the most frustrating concept he had ever attempted to wrap his mind around. How could it even be possible to reduce a scroll containing a countless amount of kanji into a simple 4 to 5 symbol formula? It took 2 weeks, and an immeasurable amount of work when considering the number of clones, before Naruto produced a formula that he could be only about 25% confident would work. It was the best he could do, however, so he left only a few clones to further ponder the jutsu and the shortened formula while he went to a secluded area. Attempting to actually use the Hiraishin was not something he could power through with a ton of clones. He needed to sit still and feel for the tear in spacetime combined with the feeling of his chakra in the handle of the kunai. After a few days, he had still felt nothing and his clones had not made any advance. Naruto was convinced, by this point, that the formula had to work. In order to increase the chances of feeling the kunai's chakra through the spacetime tear, he began to excrete his own chakra. At first, it seemed useless. At some point, however, Naruto felt it, the pulse of chakra from the handle of the kunai. It was faint, incredibly so, and obviously there was work to do since the object was only sitting a foot or two away from him, but it was a major breakthrough. As it turned out, once he sensed the kunai the first time, it got easier to feel with every attempt. Whenever he wanted to feel it, he could easily. And whenever he wanted to ignore it, it would stop. Apparently, sensing the kunai was more of a mental skill. Having gotten that down, the next step was simple, at least theoretically, teleportation. Or, as the case may be, forcing his chakra to flow through a tear in spacetime which would allow him to transport himself from one location to another in the blink of an eye. If that was not teleportation, however, he was certain it was as close as was possible through the use of jutsu. Getting his chakra to transport him was probably the easiest part of learning the jutsu, and even then, it took 10 hours. It was obvious that the Nidaime designed the jutsu in order to make the process as seamless as possible when compared to the rest of the learning procedure. All he really had to do was focus on the kunai and allow his chakra to connect to the point and move him. After he had managed to teleport a few times, however, he realized that he needed to practice orienting himself when he came out of the kunai. From what he had heard, his father could pop up in any direction he wanted, including even a few feet away. He spent a few more days like this, allowing himself to practice the technique and learn some of its nuances before committing to advancing much further. Even in the relatively short amount of time he was working on the technique, at least compared to the many years his father had spent perfecting it, it began to be second nature to feel the kunai's chakra. When he was able to change his stance mid-transport, he decided to move on. Sure, he still could only pop up within a few inches of the kunai, but he decided to work on that later. Somehow, after all of the careful training he had done up to that point, he allowed himself to get a bit arrogant and carried away. He had his clones create approximately 100 sealed kunai and place them all throughout the mountain. It had never occurred to him that he should not go from practicing on one kunai to practicing with so many, however, and as he began to search out the kunai's chakra, he became overloaded and passed out. When he woke up, he had one hell of a headache. The next time he tried, he was less overwhelmed and managed to stay conscious. He began to feel out the chakra when he asked the question that had never occurred to him. Not a single person had ever indicated he was a sensor, and neither had his own experiences. So, how was it that he could feel the chakra from the kunai? After pondering the thought for a few hours, knowing somehow that it would be important for something, he came to a conclusion. There was something about the kanji formula that allowed for the chakra from the kanji to leak into the space-time rift and create a unique path back to him, which he then retraced when he used his chakra to teleport between the kunai. It was at this point that Naruto realized, truly, that the second Hokage and his father were both geniuses of chakra theory. It took a few days' worth of practice, but eventually, he was able to feel all of the kunai's individual chakra and teleport quickly to them. It was then that Naruto realized yet another aspect of the jutsu. The space-time rift worked in such a way that, when he sensed the chakra from the kunai, he could feel the distance somehow. After more hours of practice, he guessed that the chakra path deteriorated on its way through the rift back to him, resulting in each individual chakra path having a different strength that correlated to distance. This meant that, theoretically, there was a distance wherein the path would not be strong enough to reach back to him. He was getting ready to test this theory when Ma told him that he needed to go back to Konoha. Dad was a real genius, wasn't he? He asked to Kakashi, who simply scoffed. Yes, he was. We could be on a mission, rain pouring down on our tent, lightning striking within a mile, and if he got the idea for a jutsu, it was obvious that he didn't notice the outside world. Naruto allowed himself a smile, thinking of the man that he had never met and never would meet. Yet somehow, with the Hiraishin, it felt like part of his father was there with him now. But don't sell yourself short, Naruto. Only 2 men have ever learned Hiraishin and they've both become Hokage. I still don't know how Sensei ever convinced Sandaime-sama to let him learn the Hiraishin in the first place. It's the only item with a triple S ranking, so you guess they don't just hand it out freely. You'll have to show me it soon. Promise? Promise. Naruto allowed his head to rest gently on Kakashi's back as they went through the forest, a silence between the two of them. There was so much work to be done with the jutsu still, so many ways he could develop his skill further. After all, compared to the feats boasted by his father, he was merely a novice in usage. He decided, however, that maybe he'd give it a break for a day or two, surely he had earned one. Maybe get Kakashi to tell him stories about his old man. Soon enough, they got back to the village, where Naruto was surprised to see an enormous crowd ready to greet them. "Our hero has returned!" came a loud shout from the crowd as numerous people began to run toward him. He got off Kakashi's back, feeling well enough to finally support his own weight. Kakashi simply took a step back, however. Before he knew it, there were children hugging him, tears in their eyes, thanking him for saving their families. He stood still, shocked. It felt so strange to him, he simply could not react. "The hero of the leaf, Naruto returned to us, our savior!" Numerous shouts came from the crowd, as they continued moving toward him. It felt surreal. They were talking about him? It seemed too good to be true. Almost like something from a dream. He couldn't move his body at all, too dazed by the situation. He was startled back to life when Sakura ran toward him. "Naruto," she said, wrapping him in a tight hug. He could tell that she was crying, and from the fact that her hug was not crushing his will to live, exhausted as well. He willed his body to return the gesture, patting her on the back, as the woman who was one of the strongest people he knew cried into his chest. "Hey, are you okay, Sakura-chan?" He didn't know what to say. This was an entirely new experience to him. The pinkette looked up at him, eyes red. "Am I okay?" So many people died." He was unstoppable. "I thought we were all dead. Then you show up. And you beat him. And you saved all those people." Sakura's explanation was somewhat hard for Naruto to understand, but he got the gist of it. Of course the girl was a bit emotional after everything that had happened. He could not even comprehend what the fight must have been like before he got there. Chaos, no idea what was going on, people dying all around. He continued to hug her, trying to soothe the fearsome Kunoichi. After a few more seconds the girl let go of him as the crowd arrived. Naruto was greatly surprised when he found himself hoisted in the air by the massive group of people. 3 cheers for the hero of the leaf. Konoha's second yellow flash. Naruto! They cheered, throwing him into the air as they did so and getting ready to do it again as soon as he was caught. Naruto! A part of him finally accepted a simple fact. The villagers actually respected him. Acknowledged him. Loved him. After all the hard work, all the pain, all the fighting, they finally acknowledged him. He was smiling now, as brightly as he could ever remember. Naruto! There was still a lot of work left ahead of him, but for the moment, he was a hero. The Akatsuki were defeated, nobody had died from the attack. He'd just enjoy himself for now. Approximately 1 week later, the Tsuchikage's office was a rather drab room, as dull as the stone that the village of Iwagakure was carved from. He had a desk, a window, and 2 chairs. The man himself was an old man, veteran of multiple great shinobi wars, and master of the rare particle release. Currently in his office was one of his spies from Konoha, telling a story that sounded almost unbelievable. "Hold on, before you ramble on, let me get a few things straight. Got it?" The girl nodded her head, and the elder leader cleared his throat. Konohagakure was nearly destroyed in an attack, Hide Tsuchikage-sama, perpetrated by a man presumed to be the leader of Akatsuki? From what I heard, Hide Tsuchikage-sama. This was a troublesome thought. IWA had often turned toward the Akatsuki mercenary group in order to cheaply complete the missions that were not quite worth sending his regular shinobi on. He had not really known they were a group of S-ranked missing nin at the time, of course, but still, there was no doubt to him that if Konoha were to find the headquarters of this leader, they could probably find some evidence linking him to the group. And this one man was enough to bring the great village of Konoha to its knees? He was being a bit sarcastic when referring to Konoha as such, though really, it was not much of an exaggeration. How could one of the 5 great ninja villages be brought down so easily? There had been no real indication that the city had softened up through the years, but now that he thought about it, maybe that Suna invasion a few years back had done a bit more than reported. Well, there were actually a few of them, I believe, but they all referred to them as one. So, I guess it was only one man? But he had the Rinnegan. For a second, he thought that maybe this particular spy had completely lost her mind when suggesting that one person had managed to leave Konoha in ruins. It seemed impossible. However, the idea that this person possessed the Rinnegan would definitely give them almost unimaginable power. Those eyes were legendary for their power, and someone who owned them would be nearly unstoppable. Which raised an important question in his mind. So, how exactly was someone with the Rinnegan, clearly a competent opponent from your description, defeated? The girl in front of him began to sweat suddenly, and avoided eye contact with him. This was very uncharacteristic from many of his shinobi, as most of the younger ones did not have the good sense to be afraid of him. At any other time, it would probably make him nostalgic for the days when friendly and enemy shinobi alike feared his very name. It definitely made him more curious in the whole situation. It was, you see, it's like this. It was so sad to see a trained shinobi spy behaving in such a manner. Back in his day, it never would have been tolerated and the girl would have been dismissed immediately. When had he allowed their training to slip so far? Spit it out. He needed to know at this point. If Konoha had some sort of secret, Rinnegan's stopping weapon, it could disrupt the balance of power in the elemental nations. Well, she began, clearly still a bit hesitant. The village was almost defeated, clearly losing its will to fight back. Suddenly, in the middle of a giant crater, a blond kid in his upper teens appeared on top of a giant toad. A toad summons? He said, getting a nod. This was already a bit surprising. When the rumor came around that Jiraiya had died, and with his spies seemingly confirming this rumor, he had thought that maybe the old man had taken the toad contract to the grave with him. Apparently, someone else had been allowed to sign it. Anyway, for a minute, nothing happened. Then he reached into his pouch and pulled out a kunai. I could not see anything special about it from where I watched. He threw it, and made a hand signal that caused the one kunai to multiply into hundreds. At first I thought he was foolish, thinking that such a man could be defeated by such a simple technique. The enemy dodged easily, and kunai littered the battlefield. It was then that he disappeared. Anoki felt a pain in his chest and in his head, and for a moment thought that maybe he was having a heart attack combined with a stroke. A lone shinobi throwing hundreds of kunai onto the battlefield? Then disappearing? Plus, hadn't the girl mentioned earlier that the kid was blonde? It reminded him of the last war, of the man whom had killed many of his best shinobi. He could still see it in his head, usually only in his nightmares. Maybe there was still a chance he was jumping to conclusions, then reappeared in an instant. It made me think of a yellow flash. Just hearing the words flash and yellow in the same sentence again after all these years made him feel like he had spontaneously aged 15 years. If it were not for his decades of experience, he thought that maybe he would have fallen dead out of his chair. He did not, however, and began the fight to regain his composure. The fight escalated and I stood awestruck, watching the confrontation. Eventually, however, he managed to whittle down the number of enemies before using some sort of shadow clone jutsu combined with what I presumed to be Hiraishin to swarm the last guy standing. And just like that, the Rinnegan user was defeated. Having seen the end of the fight, I immediately left to inform you. Hearing the word Hiraishin made him shiver, but if the girl saw it, she was wise enough to say nothing. How could it be possible? That monster had been the only one who was ever recorded using the technique in such a way, and he had died almost 2 decades ago. He could still remember the smile on his face when he learned of it. Konoha, somehow, had taught another shinobi to use the technique. How foolish he was to have wasted all the years. If only he had done something all those years ago, maybe he could have prevented this. Suddenly, he felt a jolt of resolution through his body, and the calmness drilled into him from the time when he was himself a genin returned to him. He could no longer be the fence-sitter. Something had to be done, and that was final. The problem, however, was that even a weakened Konoha combined with Suna would likely be able to defeat IWA in a conflict. The first step to action would be to seek out a powerful ally, and Anoki knew of only one of the 5 Kage who would be willing to even talk to him about this. About the same time, the office of the Reikage was essentially a weightlifting room with a desk next to a window. An extremely muscular man sat behind the desk, the hat of his office on his head, and over 100 pounds of weights in his right arm serving as a warm-up. Across from him sat a somewhat timid man, deemed useless in the field of traditional ninja work but trained in appearing average. He was one of the few permanent spies he sent out, and this one had been in Konoha. The man told an incredible story, involving a man with the Rinnegan appearing out of nowhere, wreaking havoc, and reducing a large section of the city to rubble. Rarely had he found himself so interested in something that did not involve his own training. If this were true, that meant that Konoha had finally been taken down a notch. And then, when everything seemed lost and I was planning an escape, a giant cloud of smoke arose from the crater. When it cleared, I saw some blonde teenager sitting atop the boss of the Toad Summons. A teenager being able to summon the leader of one of the major summoning clans? That was very impressive, but he doubted that they would be any match for the Rinnegan. It was admirable, however, for a young shinobi to be so willing to die for his village. Maybe he could replace that kid with some Kumo shinobi and have it taught in the academy? But why exactly was his spy worried with a meaningless detail like hair color in that situation? After a moment, he drew out a kunai. He was a good distance away, so at the time, I did not notice anything special about it. He threw it, and did a hand seal which caused it to multiply to around 200 kunais. Naturally, against the Rinnegan, all of them missed. But then something happened after that. I am not sure if you'll believe me. I raised an eyebrow at the man. He was the Reikage, he could handle any revelation no matter how big or small. How dare he, some cowardly spy, even imply that he would be unable to understand? Maybe he'd give him a lightning straight, and hospitalize him to remind him of his place. He disappeared, and a split second later, reappeared above one of the kunai. He did not even have the time for his brain to process what exactly had been said before his body reacted and his left hand shattered the wooden desk into nothing but splinters. A second later, he allowed himself to think. It seemed that Konoha had found some way to teach the Hiraishin Jutsu to one of its shinobi. He knew that it had always been a possibility. He just wondered why they had not immediately done it upon that blonde's death. You am anyway, the man said, for some reason shocked by the destroyed desk. That Konoha shinobi won the fight, and I immediately decided that you would only believe me if I told you myself. So I left for Kumo as quickly as I could, knowing that I would not be missed among all the casualties. It was good of you to tell me this. Dismissed. Left alone in his office, I began to think. If there was now a second yellow flash, it could be nothing but trouble for his entire village. The original had been the only man he had ever encountered who could move faster than him, and the time they encountered each other in a forest still got under his skin. The way that man had toyed with him and his brother, as if they were nothing. Of course, he had improved in the many years since then and had always wanted another meeting. Until now, that had been impossible with the man dead. The opportunity was perfect, really. Konoha would be weakened and in a state of rebuilding. If Kumo could strike now, it might be the best chance they'd ever have to eliminate Konoha as a threat. Not to mention, he could get the chance to face the Yellow Flash once more and prove that he was now the strongest shinobi in the elemental nations. Even if he did not get to do it personally, the satisfaction would be almost the same. Plus, there was the fact that B would be around to protect the village, meaning he could be on the front lines. And though he would never admit it out loud, it could be extremely dangerous to let some teenager who managed to learn the Hiraishin more time to develop. There was a problem, however, in the form of Suna. Sure, Suna was the weakest of the 5 ninja villages, but they were not weak. Fighting Konoha and Suna at the same time, alone, would prove a very difficult task. Although he was confident that his shinobi would pull through, especially with his leadership, there had to be some way to help shift the odds even more into his corner. That's when an idea struck him that made him so excited he jumped out of his seat and accidentally threw the weights in his right hand through the ceiling. Of course, there was one other Kage who would hate to hear about a new yellow flash. It had been about 3 weeks since the pain attack, and Naruto was spending yet another day committed to doing nothing other than helping to rebuild the village of Konoha. As he had found out a long time ago on the Wave mission, his shadow clones were perfect for the task of large-scale construction. Sure, they were not exactly carpenters or architects, but people were needed to move the building materials and other simple tasks. He could not be exactly sure, but he guessed there were around 300 of himself running around, all fully occupied. The village was really rallying itself together, and for the first time, Naruto felt he understood the will of fire. Many of these people, ranging from civilians to high-ranking shinobi, had lost all of their worldly possessions in the attack, and yet, here they were working their hardest to rebuild. They had the option to either break down or work hard, and they chose hard work. Unfortunately, not everyone was able to contribute to the effort. As it turns out, when Nagato returned life to the dead, the jutsu healed the fatal wound only. So, there were still a large amount of injuries to deal with. The hospital had been in the center of Konoha, and thus was completely destroyed by pain. One of the first things they set up in the days following the attack was a large medical area consisting of many large tents. It was a crude, not entirely sanitary method of dealing with the injuries, but was the only real option they had. All shinobi who knew medical jutsu were called upon to help treat the patients, but since medical jutsu was not a widespread area of expertise, the volunteers had a difficult time. With Lady Tsunade in a coma, Sakura was doing her best to lead the effort. Naturally, with the hospital destroyed, there was a large shortage in herbs and medicine to treat infections and help deal with the pain. Messengers had been sent out to numerous surrounding villages asking for donations, but the only one that sent aid in response was Suna. It was not a lot, and Naruto could understand because he distinctly remembered them having only a small herb garden, but it was enough to help the cause. Thankfully, most of the critical cases were taken care of in the first week and many of the patients were now stabilized. Naruto still worried though. Last time he had seen Sakura, she looked like she had not slept for days. Currently, he found himself working mostly to rebuild the market district. It was important to get the economy of the village functioning again if Konoha was going to recover from the attack. At least, that is what Shikamaru's dad, advised. The man was one of the leading figures in the rebuilding and was apparently as much of a genius as Shikamaru, so Naruto did not really think himself one to argue. Naruto! He heard his name shouted, and thought the voice sounded only a little familiar. Getting the feeling that this much excitement was probably more than another academy student seeking an autograph, he looked around, planks of wood still held firmly on his shoulders. It took a second, but he eventually saw someone who looked a bit out of place. An old man with a large backpack in hand holding a toolbox with a younger kid, around 12 years old, next to him. Wow! Tazuna! Inari! How many years had it been since he'd seen them? 4 already? It was hard to believe how time could fly by sometimes. He quickly hauled the wood to where it needed to go and rushed to greet them. Hugging Inari tightly, he lifted the child up onto his shoulders. He was not entirely sure why he did it, it just felt right. He reached out to shake Tazuna's hand. "What are you guys doing here? And how'd you find me? Are you kiddin'?" The older man said, laughing. "When I heard what happened to Konoha, I figured the least I could do was offer my service after everything you brats did for me. Of course, Inari here's been rearing to visit ever since you left, but business has picked up too much. Besides, pretty easy to find you, we just kept asking all those clones. You keep him busy? Oh yeah, barely have a day off. Maybe one of these days I'll get to come down there and visit you guys if you don't mind? Naruto did not want to impose, but it would be great to go down to Wave Country sometime, and see how much things had changed since his first mission all those years ago. Of course not, Naruto and I. The kid atop him shouted, making Naruto chuckle a bit. It was hard to believe that at one time he wanted to knock him on top of the head. I hear they've been calling you a hero now. You know, you were our hero first, and don't you forget it. Trust me, Nari, I don't think I'll ever be able to forget your village. Having your sensei captured, almost dying, having your best friend almost die, having your enemy turn friend die, then seeing the demon of the hidden mist shed tears as he ripped men apart with a lone kunai between his teeth, all on your first mission outside the village, was not exactly something that was easy to forget. How have you been holding up anyway? Good, I'm learning to become a fisherman. Like Kaiza. Well, I'm also learning a bit about construction. Mixing it up, you know? Naruto nodded, happy that the child had a direction in his life nowadays. I'm glad to hear it. I guess I haven't been doing anything too interesting, mostly training. Yeah, right. I bet you've got tons of cool ninja stories to tell. Well, maybe a few. Some involving giant toads, one involving a guy with more than one heart. But that will have to wait for some other time. Why not now? You've got all these clones doing work, can't we just hang out for a bit? The boy was obviously a bit disappointed, and truth be told, Naruto was as well. Listen, I'm sorry that I can't visit longer, but what kind of hero would I be if the village was destroyed and I spent all my time chatting? I'll have to catch you guys later. Try to find me before you leave, alright? If we don't run into each other again? Naruto reached up to put Inari back onto the ground, who gave just the tiniest hint of a whine. Oh yes, of course. I need to go find my employer anyway. Come on, Inari. I think we've bothered the poor guy enough for today. Yeah, whatever, old man. See you around, Naruto and I. The two of them walked off, leaving Naruto with a smile. As good as it was to see Tazuna and Inari again, there was no shortage of work to be done. And yet, now that he thought about it, there was one thing in particular that he knew he needed to do above all else. He'd been avoiding it for a few days, but he didn't really know why. He might as well get it taken care of while he was already distracted. Walking through the designated medical area, he couldn't help but notice a ton of activity as Medic Neen moved from tent to tent checking on their patients. It seemed like there were a lot of people still incapacitated even after all the weeks. He knew where he was going, however. He walked to a large white tent that was deemed the medical headquarters. Inside, he saw a few people working to ration the medicine among the patients and discussing various things that he could not quite hear. Walking toward the back, however, he saw a familiar head of pink hair. Look, we simply can't perform that surgery with our medical supplies. I've told you, we're sticking to performing critical operations only. If it isn't life-threatening, we just can't do it right now. Sakura. The pinkette turned away from the nurse she was talking with to look at him, and Naruto could not help but feel concerned for his teammate. Her usually well-kept hair was in total disarray, and she had bags underneath her eyes. Her whole body was slouched over ever so slightly, and her eyes were mostly unfocused. Oh, Naruto? What are you doing here? She said, barely stifling a yawn at the end. Thinking as quickly as he could, Naruto devised a quick little scheme. Hey Sakura-chan. I wanted to check up on you and Ba-chan. Can you show me her tent? I think they moved her or something. Ugh, Naruto, can't you see I'm busy? She said, her voice sounding more desperate than angry. Come on, Sakura, it'll only take a second. He knew he was probably annoying her a bit, but right now, it was what she needed. She sighed a bit, and looked around as if to see if anyone was looking for her, before walking past him. He followed, presuming she was doing as he asked. Lady Tsunade's been in stable condition for a while now. She is perfectly healthy, but her body's not ready to wake up. Yeah, I guess it takes a while for the old hag's body to take care of itself these days, huh? Sakura chuckled, and Naruto was happy to have made her laugh even a little bit in her current overworked state. Actually, her age probably does have something to do with it. Just don't tell her I said so, she said with a smile. Anyway, this is her tent. If you'll excuse me, would you mind coming in with me? I just hate seeing her like this, you know? He gave her his best puppy dog look, knowing she'd be completely unable to resist in her current state. Who needed a Yamanaka mind control jutsu anyway? She just sighed again before going in through the opening, bypassing the two ANBU guards. Oh, hello, are you here to see Lady Tsunade? Shizen said from the woman's side. Naruto was glad to see her, and it looked like his little gamble would definitely pay off. Hey Shizen, Naruto just wanted to check up on her. Still the same? Yeah, no changes. Hopefully she'll be waking up within the next few days. Look, Shizen, I was hoping you could fill in for Sakura for the rest of the day. I know you're qualified for the job. Sakura needs a break. Naruto sprung his trap on the unsuspecting pinkette, who looked at him shocked. Naruto! Thanks for the concern, but I'm more than capable. Her sentence was interrupted by a rather vicious yawn. Sakura, you're the best medic Nin I know. In a few years you'll be better than Tsunade. But you need to rest. You know it's not possible to do your best work when you're this tired. Shizen can hold down the fort, right Shizen? He looked over to the surprised apprentice, pleading with her to say yes even if he had kinda put her on the spot. If you need a break, you can always come to me. If Lady Tsunade wakes up when I'm not here, I am sure she will understand. Sakura just looked between the two of them before she finally relaxed a bit. Okay, I guess, maybe, I may need a nap. But I'll be there in an hour or two to take over again, okay Shizen? The older apprentice nodded. Naruto, will you walk me back to my tent? You know, be a gentleman and all that. Sure thing. They left the tent, Shizen heading towards the medical headquarters while Naruto followed Sakura to what he presumed to be her personal quarters. Sorry to spring that up on you. I just knew that you'd never agree if I spoke to you around all those people. He tried explaining himself to his teammate. You don't need to apologize. I know better than to push myself that hard. What happens if I pass out suddenly from chakra exhaustion? There's just so much to do, so many people who need my help. I don't know how you do it, Naruto. Wanting to protect all of them, she said, practically whispering toward the end. I understand what you mean, Sakura. It's tough looking out for so many people. I guess that's why everyone thought I was an idiot for wanting to be Hokage. Well, one of the reasons. But people will look up to you for it, for volunteering for a job that everyone knows is hard. Besides, if it's something as important as this, wouldn't you rather know it was you looking out for all of them? Since somebody else could get it wrong, when did you get so smart? She said with a smirk, causing him to chuckle. I guess I get a stroke of inspiration every now and then, he said, causing her to laugh right back at him. It felt good, just talking to her for a bit. It was something he had not really been doing ever since the attack. They had just both been so busy. Maybe if I paid more attention I would have noticed when you changed so much. Naruto was confused by her statement, not really getting it. It's obvious, you know. To anyone paying attention it is easy to see how much you've grown. Before the attack, nobody was looking enough to see it. But now you're a hero. Everybody will start to see it for themselves. I'm happy for you, even if it means everyone else will keep you busy. Thanks, Sakura-chan. He did not understand exactly what she was trying to say, but attributed it mostly to her state of extreme fatigue. The pinkette rarely made so little sense to him. Well, this is my 10 Naruto. Home sweet home, I guess. Funny, I'm a medic nin, but I guess sometimes even I still need other people to watch out for me. It's okay, just makes up for the thousands of times you've had to heal or visit me in a hospital, he offered with a smile. He could already tell that just their conversation had done her some good. It was as if some of the weight on her shoulders had been physically removed and she was walking a bit straighter. Thank you, she said before going inside. He left, knowing the poor woman would be sound asleep within 5 minutes simply from the look on her face. It was kind of ironic, really, all the times where people had told him that he'd be unable to help anyone if he wore himself out, and now he was making sure Sakura didn't do the same thing. Unsure of what to do with the rest of his day, he started doing a few odd jobs back in the market district. About 2 hours later, he was interrupted from his important menial labor by some messenger. Needless to say, he was very surprised to find that he was being summoned by Shikaku, a man whom he had only met one time prior for about 1 minute while he was told what to do and why. Still, if the Jounin commander was summoning him personally, that had to mean something important was going on. He wasted no time in heading toward the temporary military headquarters. The current headquarters was the largest tent available to them, which was necessary since it was trying to replace the Hokage Tower. A lot of activity took place inside the tent, as messenger shinobi frequently went in and out to take orders to certain shinobi. Walking inside, he saw many ninja running around or discussing which kinds of missions they should be taking in their current state, and who to send on them. Eventually, he found Shikaku near the back, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else on the planet. Hey, Shikaku, you needed me for something? To say he was curious as to why he would possibly be called for at a time like this was an understatement. Oh, Naruto, you're here already? Good. Naruto saw him reach into a pouch on his belt and pulled out a book. After years of training with Kakashi and Jiraiya, he was somewhat surprised when it actually was not an Ika book. Are you aware of what a bingo book is? Yeah, it's where all the bounties for missing nin are listed. What's this got to do with me? You are only half right. The Nara stated casually. Bingo books not only contain bounties on missing nin, but can also contain bounties on shinobi still affiliated with their villages. This is usually frowned upon since it's essentially putting a hit on another country's shinobi, but exceptions are made for 2 reasons. 1. The shinobi is seen as a great threat to the village in the event of war, and 2. The village wants to make a statement. Now, this bingo book just so happens to be a new release from Iwagakure. Typically, on-duty shinobi would be listed in a black market book, and not an official release. Look through it and tell me what you see. Naruto hesitantly picked up the book, and thumbed through it until he found the section on Konoha. Looking through it, he saw a bunch of ninja he had never seen before and were mostly chunin level, or as the book stated them, B-rank danger. He was deeply surprised when he turned the page and was suddenly looking at a picture of himself. Off the top of his head he could not even think of how IWA could have gotten a recent picture, but it looked to be within the last 6 months or so. This is me, he said plainly, not sure what else he was supposed to say. He had never even been in IWA, and they were putting a bounty on him? That didn't make any sense. Read the description was the only response that he got. Doing as he was told, he was further surprised when they seemed to know his age, height, and weight. How exactly had they gotten all this info? No nicknames. Hero of the Leaf, second yellow flash. Danger level, S rank. Strengths, the Hiraishin Jutsu, ninjutsu specialist. Combatants below S rank encouraged to disengage until reinforced. He found himself reading it out loud, somewhat unable to process everything. It felt weird to be deemed an S rank ninja, even if he had defeated Kakazu in pain and knew he already had 2 S rank jutsu to his name. Also, it seemed a bit odd that they would already know those things about him since they were so new. And the bounty? His eyes skipped back to the very top of the page, where the bounty was usually listed. He had bypassed it earlier out of surprise from seeing his own picture and name, he supposed. 50 million Ryo. That was an absolutely shocking number. He had seen maybe one other person while he was skimming the pages whose bounty even reached close to 5 million. Why was IWA willing to pay so much to go after him? It didn't make any sense, dead or alive. Now I need you to listen to me, alright? That is not just a regular bounty on your head, it is the highest current total in the book. For comparison, Kakazu was at 25 million. Haiden was 20 million. Deidara, whom was from IWA, was only at 15 million. Sasori? 13 million. Asuma, son of an active Hokage with direct ties to the daimyo, was held at 35. I think that it's clear that Tsuchikage is holding a bit of a grudge from your father's actions in the last war. Additionally, I don't think it's possible, certainly not probable, that IWA is paying that total alone. There has been a lot of troublesome things happening recently. As you know, we're allied with Kusa, who serves as a buffer between the lands of earth and fire. We just got a message about a day ago from them stating that a lot more IWA nin are doing increased border patrols. Coincidentally, to the northeast, we've got reports that Kumo nin have been patrolling into the land of bears and harassing Hashigakure. Officially, Kumo and IWA have never been allied, though for a large portion of the last war they practically ignored each other. Personally, I think it is odd that IWA and Kumo are testing our allies at the same time, and I think the two of them are cooperating. It was amazing how lazy the man could sound even when describing something that seemed important. Naruto did his best to try to comprehend everything. Kumo and IWA working together against Konoha would obviously never be a good thing, but it was especially bad at a time like this where a lot of shinobi were either injured or occupied with rebuilding the village. So, why are you telling me all this? He wasn't entirely sure he understood the point of telling him anything past where he learned he was in the bingo book. As interesting as it all was, he was just some low-level genin. You're a hero now, Naruto. The honor is not without its burdens. These people look up to you, respect you. And if Kumo and IWA start encroaching on us, they'll look for you to leadership. Shikamaru told me you want to be Hokage. Well, this is where it starts. Just like your father. Now, it seems obvious to me that, if you've defeated 2 S-ranked opponents and are S-ranked in Iwa's bingo book, you are not a genin-level shinobi. On my authority as Jounin commander, I hereby grant you a field promotion to the level of Jounin effective immediately, to be judged by Lady Hokage upon her recovery. At some point, Naruto had started to wonder if perhaps Shikaku's ability to give such detailed explanations without changing pitch while sounding completely disinterested was some kind of Nara Kekai Genkai. It was a bit worrisome to think that people would start looking to him for guidance, but like Shikaku said, it was a natural step toward his dream. Still, he was completely blindsided by his sudden apparent promotion. Thanks I guess? He did not really know what to say. He went from learning that people would be willing to pay an absurd amount of money for his death to being promoted and skipping the rank of Chunin. It was a bit of an emotional roller coaster, to say the least. One more thing, the amount of work you've done for this village is appreciated greatly. However, you should be ready for regular mission duty. At the very least, every Jounin is needed at this time, but we especially cannot have an S-rank shinobi unavailable. That will be all. Naruto gave the man a courteous nod before turning around. There was a lot for him to take in. He had to worry about the possibility of conflict once again on the horizon as well as prepare for his new duties as a Jounin. Not to mention the fact that he would have to tell all of his friends. He could already see Konohamaru's smile. Wait, Naruto. He had barely taken a step before he heard the Nara's voice call out to him. Well, if speaking slightly louder than usual counts as calling out. Yeah? What is it? For a second, he allowed himself to think that maybe he had walked away too early, but he was sure that Shikaku dismissed him. Look, I guess I feel bad that you're a teenager and have a bounty on your head or something. Not sure. You don't have to listen, but I just want to give you some advice. Your father used the Hiraishin. The jutsu did not use him. Shikaku waved his hand to dismiss him this time, and Naruto thought that maybe it was possible the man had enjoyed using him as a distraction from his duties. He was not entirely sure what exactly a Jounin commander was responsible for, but it seemed they had a lot of responsibility when the Hokage was out of action. As night began to approach, Naruto began to walk back toward his tent. At this point in the day, Most of his shadow clones had finished their construction jobs and dismissed themselves, and as a result, he was feeling rather exhausted. He did not quite understand Shikaku's last words to him, but assumed that he would figure it out given a little bit of rest. It had been a long day, full of physical labor and surprises. Uzumaki-san, I have called for a meeting of the Konoha Council to take place at sunrise tomorrow in the military headquarters. It is my wish that you will be able to attend as a guest of mine. This scroll will serve as your key to get into the tent, and I look forward to seeing you there. The main topic of discussion will be the seemingly impending threat of war. This event will be heavily guarded by ANBU and some of my personal bodyguard, but this scroll shall grant you access past them. Advisor to the Hokage, Danzo Shimura. Naruto had found the small, somewhat indistinct scroll at the foot of his bed rest as he returned from another long day of laboring. His interest had, of course, immediately been piqued, and he had been eager to read it. After reading it, however, he had no idea what to think. How long ago had it been where he had been training at Mount Myaboku, before the village was devastated by Pain's attack, before his promotion to Jounin? Not long ago at all, and yet, here he was, requested to attend an important council meeting by somebody he had never met. And so he found himself making his way to the headquarters in the early hours of the day, the sun barely beginning to rise somewhere far to the east. He was very nervous about the whole matter, being unsure of too many things. What would happen at the council meeting? What kind of discussion would it be? Was war really impending? Would he be able to even talk clearly in the face of so many people who were undoubtedly well-versed in politics? And most importantly, why was he even being called for in the first place? All these questions and more weighed on his mind as he presented the scroll to the ANBU guards in front of the tent, who glanced at the signature at the bottom before giving him permission to go inside. He stepped through the folds of the tent and immediately looked around. In the middle of the floor there was a large circular desk, with chairs gathered around and people occupying them. It was pretty easy to recognize most of them, considering the number of friends he had who were the children of clan heads. Yamanaka, Hyuga, Akimichi, Aburame, Inuzuka, and Nara made up most of the group, with several of the clan heads having an advisor for themselves. Naruto, what are you doing here? Shikaku asked, rising from his position of being head down on the desk with a questioning look in his eye. Naruto was not really too sure what to say, aside from being invited, before someone else answered from right behind him. Uzumaki-san is a guest of mine, Shikaku. Shikaku kept the same questioning look in his eye as he put his head back down, his glance not breaking from them. Naruto turned around and came face to face with the man that he presumed to be Danzo Shimura. He was flanked on either side by an older man and an older woman, people he had seen prior at the third or Tsunade's side. He was a tall man, standing straight and composed though supported by a cane. His right arm was covered in bandages and supported by a sling. His right eye and forehead were also covered in bandaging. Naruto wondered what sorts of injuries the man must have endured to be in such shape. Ah, Uzumaki-san, it is a pleasure to meet you at last. I am Danzo Shimura, thank you for coming on such short notice. The man bowed ever so slightly, and Naruto returned it with a slightly deeper bow. He then walked past Naruto before taking a seat at the sole remaining empty chair. I thank you all for coming on such short notice. The older man and woman, the Hokage's advisors, Naruto reminded himself, both stood to the left of him. Naruto, seeing a pattern of everyone left standing in the room being next to a clan head, decided to stand to the right of Danzo. He was sure he saw the man smile ever so slightly at the action. Yeah, just tell us all why you wanted this meeting, the Inuzuka said with a yawn, getting a series of nods from the other clan heads. Very well, no time can be wasted in dire circumstances such as these, I suppose? As you are all undoubtedly aware, the allies of Konoha are currently being tested. Kusa is sending in reports of incursions by IWA, and Hoshi is reporting that several of their patrols have already been attacked by Kumo. These actions are a proven precursor of war. It cannot be known, at this point in time, whether or not war is inevitable, but I think we can all agree that it is safer to play upon the assumption that it is. We were just attacked, a large part of the village was destroyed. Don't you find it more likely that the two nations are trying to explore their boundaries a bit? The Akimichi asked, to which Danzo shook his head. If that were true, why were similar actions not taken after the attack by Orochimaru and Suna? If anything, perhaps it would have been a more opportune time. A nation, leaderless without its Hokage, having lost one of its supposed allies, surely would have seemed a prime target. That is why I believe these recent attacks upon the villages whom align themselves to us to be a sign of a more sinister intent. The situations of Kumo and IWA have not changed much between now and then. Either is noticeably stronger, either is noticeably more wealthy. Look, Chusa, Shikaku began, seeming to regret whatever it was he was about to say, I have to agree with Danzo here. This situation should absolutely be considered one of the last steps toward war. He makes a good point about the Suna attack, and I would say he's missing an important point, but clearly he did not, if his guest of honor is any indication. The Akimichi nodded, apparently beginning to understand the seriousness of the situation. Yes, thank you Shikaku, Danzo said, his voice completely even as it had been the entire time. There is, of course, another reason I believe that war may be inevitable. This reason has to do with Uzumaki-san. Me? What about me? Naruto asked, a bit uncomfortable at having suddenly been in the spotlight. After all these years, a 17-year-old comes to the forefront with the ability to use the Hiraishin Jutsu. Danzo exclaimed, both to the council and, Naruto felt, to him personally. The first person to use it since Minato himself, the most hated man in IWA and hero of the last great shinobi war. This teenager just so happens to bear a striking resemblance to the fourth and has the ability to summon toads, a summons associated with Jiraiya and the fourth in recent memory. Immediately after Uzumaki-san unveiled his learning of the Hiraishin, we begin to see these actions by IWA and Kumo. I do not believe it a coincidence. But ultimately, that is of little importance. The true importance is that we have a response. We need to send forces to Kusa and Hoshi, show them that we're not going to back off. Some said, to which a few agreed. Inuzuka-san, I do not think it logical that we attempt to meet both sides at once. If they escalate the conflict, shinobi on both fronts will be at risk and there may be significant losses. So what would you suggest, Aburame-san? Her words held a bit of bite at being so calmly dismissed, yet genuine curiosity was present. We send a strong force to Kusa, to assure them and dissuade IWA. If IWA and Kumo are secretly allied, then we need only discourage one. There were a few nods for the Aburame, some of the present agreeing with his position. But how do we explain to Hoshi that we are ignoring their plight? It did not seem that the Yamanaka was among the supporters, however. Yamanaka-san is right. It would be a disgrace to this village if we should abandon an ally in their time of need. Our reputation will be forever stained. Nor was the Hyuga. All of the proposals are plausible options. That's why it is important to have a strong central figure who makes the decision. That's where this is going, isn't it, Danzo? Shikaku was looking at Danzo with nothing but calculation in his eyes, seemingly sure of the man's intentions. Naruto, for his part, had been attempting to figure things out for himself. If it were his decision, he would never abandon Hashigakure. He could still remember his mission there, years ago. You are correct, Shikaku. With the position of Hokage being empty in this time of crisis, our actions are unguided and imprecise, our direction unclear. How can this village possibly be expected to deal with threats such as IWA or Kumo without a decisive leader? Even you, as Jounin commander, are greatly restricted in your abilities to assign missions. If memory serves, it is illegal for anyone not of Hokage status to issue an S rank, is it not? Yes, that is correct. It has not, however, been much of an issue yet. You say much, and yet meaning that it has been a slight issue, and that you understand it could be a major one in a time of war. Additionally, the ANBU commander is not authorized to carry out missions outside the Land of Fire in such a time as there is no Hokage. So, all of you can surely understand lacking a Hokage at this point in time could be a critical blow toward this village. But we have a Hokage, Naruto said immediately afterward, causing Danzo to tilt his head toward him a bit but not say anything. It made him slightly uncomfortable. He could feel that the man was looking at him, yet it was only the bandaging. Tsunade is our Hokage, and Shizen says she could be waking up at any time. Ah yes, of course. All the reports regarding Lady Tsunade indicate that she is stable, that is, either improving or worsening. I have few doubts that she will awaken at some point. The question is when. Her condition has been stable since the first day after the battle, and yet she still slumbers. It is possible there is an underlying mental condition, some sort of trauma, that we do not yet know about. Even when she awakens, we do not know the extent to which she will have to recover. If Hokage-sama is unable to perform her duties for, say, even another month, will it be too long? Will we be in full-scale war with IWA and Kumo without a Hokage, without a strong leader? What if it's 6 months? Perhaps, without a visible Hokage, IWA and Kumo will be more inclined to continue their escalation. All of these questions have answers that this village is better off not knowing. Naruto, though he hated to admit it, could see that the elderly advisor was probably correct about the matter. Still, it did not seem right to replace a living Hokage, whether or not they were briefly incapable of leadership. Perhaps with the rising threat of IWA and Kumo, however, it was the necessary thing to do. Maybe they would back off if a Hokage was around to deter them? And even if they didn't, well, the leadership would be needed regardless. So you wish to have a vote to replace the Hokage, Danzo? You know the procedure. We hear nominations, assess their viability, then have a vote on the matter. If the vote passes with a majority, then the person who wins it is deemed temporary Hokage pending approval from the daimyo. Shikaku asked, the smallest hint of a glint in his eye. Naruto couldn't help the feeling that these two had a bit of a history. Maybe he'd ask Shikaku about it at some point. Yes, I am aware. Alright then. Who here would like to make a nomination for the Hokage position? The Nara asked, still looking directly at Danzo and apparently expecting something. If the man was deterred or intimidated in any way, however, it did not show on him at all. Danzo was like a stone statue, sitting straight up and fully composed with no emotions visible upon his face. It seemed the man had a lot of experience with the realm of politics. I would like, the elderly man to the left of Danzo began, to nominate Danzo Shimura for the position of Hokage. So, was this all just some clever play for the man to get the Hokage position? It hardly seemed like he was fit for the job, with his apparently permanent injuries. A bunch of eyes lit up across the room, and Naruto had the distinct feeling that this was not the most surprising nomination for many among them. Danzo was an older ninja. Perhaps he had been in the running for Hokage before. Fifth, fourth, maybe even third now that he thought about it. Danzo, while you are certainly an experienced shinobi and valued advisor, Shikaku began. I decline the nomination, Danzo said, causing a few of the people in the room to stare wide-eyed at the man. Interestingly enough, one of the most shocked was the man who made the nomination. Shikaku, for his part, was actually visibly shocked, a brief moment of utter confusion displayed on his face before he was able to mask it. He sat straight in his chair, for the first time in the meeting, and was staring at Danzo intently. If Shikaku was able to be tricked to such an extent, Naruto began to wonder just exactly this Danzo guy was capable of. Although it is true that, in the past, I longed to become Hokage, I fear that I may finally be too handicapped to accept the nomination in earnest. It was a dream of mine throughout my life, ever since my experiences in a team led by Naidame-sama himself. Having been passed on for the titles of third, fourth, and fifth, it is clear to me that at this point in my life it is foolish to pursue such a direction. For a brief moment, there was a slight pang of sadness in his voice. I believe, at this time, the only use I have left in this withered body of mine is as an advisor, the man continued. I would, however, be interested in making a nomination. Who would you nominate for the position, Danzo? Shikaku asked, genuine interest present in his usually bored voice. Naruto Uzumaki. The room was silent and Naruto, for his part, felt like he had just been struck by a boulder. What was going on? Here he was, suddenly thrust into the conversation for a new Hokage by a man he had just met. The only way he could have been more surprised, at this point, was if Itachi and Sasuke came through the door singing a duet about pacifism. He wanted to say something, he was sure of it, but nothing came to mind for him to say and his mouth was suddenly feeling a bit dry. If I may, allow me to explain my nomination. Uzumaki-san is certainly young, Danzo said, every eye on him at this point yet seemingly unaffected. However, we must look at the bigger picture. His strength has grown at an incredible rate, and his most recent feat includes taking down the owner of the Rinnegan. Considering that Kakashi and Tsunade were unable to surpass Pain, this makes him quite possibly the strongest shinobi in the village, and at such a young age. With his unique shadow clone training method, we are looking at a Hokage whose ability to train while even on duty is unparalleled, a shinobi strong enough to defeat the leader of an organization of S-ranked criminals who will continue to get stronger as the days go by. Additionally, even at the age of 17, he is an accomplished sensei of sorts and has taught Konohamaru Sarutobi both the Shadow Clone and Rasengan Jutsu. Would Team Episu be the most accomplished genin team of their generation without Uzumaki-san assisting in their progress? Such a thing seems doubtful. I know that he may currently lack experience, but realistically, with a team of advisors and the aid of Shikaku, I imagine that it will not be as important as it would seem. With all due respect to Naruto-san, the Abirame said, I do not believe it justifiable to appoint someone so young to the position if we are indeed in a time of crisis. We must also think of the long-term interests of the village. If Lady Tsunade continues to be incapacitated, then it poses a major problem for the village. But if someone is appointed, then they will remain so even upon Tsunade's return. This means it has to be a person who is strong, passionate, and willing to put the village first and foremost. Surely, no one is better suited by such criteria than Uzumaki-san. He is poised to be a Kage for the next 40 years, should he be appointed so young. A period of stability so long would benefit everyone. Naruto is currently unfit for the position of Hokage, Shikaku said, with a bit of force behind his words. He is completely inexperienced in field leadership and has no experience whatsoever in dealing with politics. I will not doubt his strength, nor the merits of his character. I simply believe it is too early. We have to consider that, perhaps, it would be wrong to place a burden so great on someone who is still developing. Additionally, I do not think it justifiable to take one of our few S-ranked shinobi out from active mission duty at a time such as this. Though a Hokage is needed, it does little good if we do not have the proper ninja to carry out their orders. For this reason, I propose that it should be better to not appoint a Hokage at this time and that we should, instead, focus our efforts on doing what is within our power until Lady Tsunade is capable of resuming her duties. All in favor of dismissing this council gathered for the purposes of discussing a Hokage, say aye. There was a chorus of ayes from the clan heads, who seemed happier at getting the chance to leave than having to really think about all that they had heard. Immediately, many rose from their seats and exited the tent, surprisingly enough Shikaku leading the way. Anyone who took a close look could see that something was weighing quite heavily on the genius's mind. A lot of the people seemed to have a look of thoughtfulness upon them, though Danzo for his part kept a straight face as he rose from the seat. Naruto, meanwhile, was still stuck in some state of total lockdown. He had been so surprised by his sudden nomination that everything which followed felt surreal, as if it were part of a dream. It was so strange to hear Danzo, a man whom he had only just met, advocate so adamantly for him to get a position that, he knew, he was largely unqualified for at the moment. If somehow he had been given the chance at that moment, he would have taken it, but it seemed a better option to let it happen more naturally over time. Besides, he wanted Tsunade to give him the hat directly. Strangely enough, however, he felt a bit hurt that Shikaka had shot him down so forcefully toward the end. He hadn't even heard what grievances the other clan heads may have with him. Realizing that Danzo was leaving the tent, Naruto walked after him. Danzo, what exactly was that all about? Why would you try to nominate me? And why wouldn't you let me know first? Part of him was upset over the suddenness of it all, and he wanted an explanation from the man before he disappeared. Uzumaki-san, you will have to forgive me if I sprang it upon you. I had been hoping to discuss it briefly with you this morning but, unfortunately, had very important matters which came up and delayed me. Why do you seem a bit upset? Is it not your dream, as it was mine, to become Hokage? The man was perfectly calm and did not even miss a single beat between Naruto's questioning and his response. He just continued walking ever so slowly with his cane, looking directly ahead with no sign of emotion whatsoever. Well, yeah, it is. And it will happen, 100%. I was just surprised by it coming from you, is all. I'd never met you before today. So, you didn't answer my other question. Why would you try to nominate me? I suppose it is only fair you receive the truth. Ever since the very day of your birth I have known of your Jinchuriki status and your parentage. As such, I was interested in how you would be treated and how you would progress. I wanted to be able to train you myself, but Hiruzen ruled against me on that regard. I hired a number of retired shinobi who kept tabs on you, whenever you were in the village, throughout your childhood all the way up until you left with Jiraiya. They would report to me on your status, things such as your apparent mental health, your reaction to the villagers' treatment, and eventually on the results of your training. And though I know you may bear some ill will over me watching you, I assure you it was on behalf of your potential both as a Jinchuriki and the fourth son. Potential of such levels must not be left to chance when it could benefit the village ever so much. Naruto felt the slightest bit creeped out that this guy had hired people to watch over him and report on him, but decided to try not to focus on it for the moment. I know that you will prove a worthy candidate, Danzo continued, because I know that you have suffered for this village. A true Hokage understands that it is not a perfect village nor a perfect world. This village is filled with citizens who do not understand the very frailty of their existence, shinobi who are happy to accept mediocrity in favor of an easy life. Yet, it is the most important thing in the world because it is ours. The ideal Kage understands this because they have felt it, whether it be the first who had to deal with putting it all together, deal with the distrust and the estrangement of his friends, deal with all the shinobi who doubted him, or the second, who had to deal with the growing distrust of the Uchiha as well as rising threats from the other villages and the doubt that he could ever live up to Hashirama. They had to rise up from their positions, had to overcome to gain the seat. Uncharacteristically, from what Naruto had established, Danzo's voice had raised at this point. It seemed the man was very passionate about this topic in particular. Contrast that with the most recent Kage selections. Hiruzen was long considered a genius and was well respected among the higher circles before the Second Great Shinobi War started. He had the tutorship of the second as well as the support of his clan. The toughest turmoil of his life was Orochimaru's betrayal, and through that action, his will to act crumbled. He was never the same. Minato, your father, was an orphan prodigy the likes of which the village had never seen from the moment he set foot in the academy. He may not have known it, but before he was 7 years old he had already been deemed the most promising student in years and his schooling was monitored by every major figure, from Hiruzen to myself. In the Third War it is true that he was forced to deal with losing a student, but that is suffering only for himself and was not a good gauge. When he was nominated for the position, I was not sure how he would react should he ever lose the goodwill of the village which he had held his entire life. He died, however, before anyone could know. Tsunade, how such a woman could be Hokage is beyond me. A descendant of the first, willing to turn her back on the village because she lost a lover and one relative. So many people have lost much more. So many people did lose much more in the Third War. The Uzumaki clan was wiped out, its few survivors scattered among the nations as leaves in a hurricane. And yet she should deem her own losses to be more important than the sacrifices of everyone else. But what of you, Naruto? Yes, of course you know what it is like to suffer for this village. The villagers purposefully ignored you most of your life, some showing outright disdain, others refusing you service in stores. You took it, and overcame it, and now they adore you. You've offered your life and its protection willingly, as any shinobi should, both against Gaara and recently against pain. You turned the animosity against you into adoration, the desire to ignore you into the inability to be ignored. For these reasons I am confident you will be a good Hokage. Perhaps you are a bit too enamored with the idea of necessary peace, but I believe you shall always have the village first in mind. Certainly, of your generation, you are the only candidate worth considering. I did not expect you to actually get the position today, but the seed has been planted in their heads and, as your deeds continue and your reputation grows, so too shall the seed. Now, if you will excuse me, I must be off. The elder man picked up his pace a bit as he walked off, leaving a slightly dumbfounded Naruto in his wake. Apparently, Danzo had quite a strong idea of what made a good Hokage. Whether or not it was the right assumptions to be made about the position, Naruto could not really be sure. Certainly, there was no easy way to determine who would be the best Hokage, aside from his personal assumption that he would be. Everybody looked for something a little different in their leader, and Danzo had formed his over years of experience and observation. If nothing else, it appeared that the man seemed to value highly the importance of putting the village before the self. Although, for some reason, there was something about that bandage that bothered him a bit. Oh well, it was probably nothing. As he approached the village of Kusagakure, Naruto could not help but be confused about the country. He had thought that the area surrounding Kusa would be mostly grassy plains. Instead, there was a large amount of trees and it looked almost identical to the land of fire. The countryside had a plentiful number of rivers and streams flowing through it. It was hard to believe that this was his first mission as a jounin. Even if it was possible that Tsunade would revoke the promotion, at the moment, he could enjoy the rank. So, why do you think they chose us for this mission? He asked to his one companion. The mission, as it was assigned, was simply to go to the head jounin and to assist him in any means necessary so long as it also served the good of Konoha. Basically, help Kusa unless they want them to do something that would betray their village. Naruto knew from what he had been told that Iwanin were causing a few problems along the border, both in that they were increasing their numbers and occasionally actually crossing it. The man closed his book but made sure to keep a finger on the page. Well, Naruto, here's what I think. Konoha is low on manpower at the moment. Normally, for a mission like this, they would send at least 2 teams consisting of a jounin and a few chunin. Probably also there would be various other shinobi participating in different types of missions in the area. Now, I don't think I need to be modest here. We are 2 of the village's strongest shinobi. They expect us to be able to fill in, quality over quantity and all that. Plus, if I had to guess, I would assume that they're sending us as a show of force to Iwa and a show of good faith to Kusa. Naruto nodded. He had kind of guessed that those were the approximate reasons but wanted to have a more experienced view on it. Ever since the debacle that was the council meeting with Danzo, he had been doing his best to really think on what would be the best course of action, a skill that he would certainly need when he becomes Hokage. That makes sense, Kakashi-sensei. I guess I just don't really understand why they would send me if Iwa is involved. I mean, there's a bounty on my head and they hated my father. Isn't there a chance they'll, react poorly if they see me? Yes, Naruto, that is indeed possible. However, there are 2 possibilities at the moment. Iwa is probing us for weakness, or Iwa is preparing for an inevitable attack. If it is the first option, then it would be a sign of weakness for Konoha to try to hide one of its most promising shinobi from duty. It also serves as a show of strength and confidence that we would be willing to send you here even knowing of their position regarding you. And if it is the second option, they would attack anyway, so there is no point worrying about it. Kakashi smiled at him, but Naruto was not entirely sure how he felt about the whole situation. It seemed like such a short time ago, when he promised Nagato that he would find some way to bring peace to the world, and yet here they were, on the verge of war. He believed every word he said to the man, but perhaps he had been speaking a bit too excitedly. As much as he hated to think about it, maybe he was too young to be promising all these things. After all, he was only 17 years old and barely understood the politics. Just when he was starting to feel a bit down about it all, he remembered Jiraiya and felt a renewed drive. If that old pervy sage had believed in him, the least he could do was believe in himself. Yeah, I guess you're probably right, sensei, he said, after giving it a moment's more thought. Perhaps these types of things were still a bit above his pay grade, for the moment, but he would figure it out in time. They came across a sudden clearing in the forest, and seemingly out of nowhere, there was a large plain in front of them. On this plain he saw for the first time the village of Kusagakure, and thought that maybe now he understood the name. The village was built in a large natural clearing in a forest covered by grass, so he supposed that they were hidden by the grass? Truthfully, part of him kind of thought that the village was just too late to name themselves Konohagakure, but maybe he was a bit biased. The village itself was of a decent size, nothing near Konohagakure but definitely bigger than some of the smaller ninja villages like Hashigakure. It made sense though. Kusa was often seen as one of the most likely villages to replace Suna, though Naruto was quite sure that would never happen in Gaara's term of office. Naruto and Kakashi casually strolled up to the village gates, making sure they would not be presented as a threat. The Kopinin showed the guards their signed mission scroll and they were free to meet with the leader of the seemingly growing village. Walking down the streets of the foreign village, he could see that they were doing well. A lot of people were strolling the streets, with merchant stalls up and down the sides. It made sense that they would be doing well. Lumber and food were in heavy demand by his home village at the moment, and Kusa could provide both with little issue. He tried his best to take a good look around since it was his first time actually inside the village. It was not very long before they approached the building of the village leader. Konoha had a tower designated for their Hokage, but apparently, Kusa decided on some kind of castle-like structure that was more popular among the daimyo. It was a very impressive structure, in its own way. For his own part, he preferred the tower. After a couple of minutes, they were allowed to meet the village head. At first sight, Naruto could tell that it was a man of average height with brown hair and brown eyes who seemed to be in his later 30s. Ah, the Konoha are here. My name is Ayashi, it is a pleasure to meet you. The man gave a respectful tilt of the head, which Naruto and Kakashi returned with a half bow to indicate their respect. Kakashi then proceeded to hand the man their mission scroll, which he briefly skimmed over before closing it. Good. Needless to say, I was expecting a bit more than two shinobi with the way that IWA has been behaving lately. Of course, Ayashi-sama, Kakashi began respectfully, and Naruto was almost surprised by how respectful his sensei could sound when he tried. Normally, there would certainly be more. However, your message got to us at an awkward interval in mission assignments, and many of our more capable shinobi are unavailable. My colleague and I were chosen, however, because our village does value your mission request highly. I understand, forgive me if I sounded like I was complaining. It was merely an observation. I am certain that Kakashi Hatake of the Sharingan Eye and Naruto Uzumaki, the second Yellow Flash, will be enough to help dissuade a few wandering shinobi. Now, I'm sure you have already heard that IWA has been increasing the size and frequency of their border patrols recently. I imagine the council shall be quite grateful to hear that it is you who has been sent. You will be teaming up with two of my more experienced genin squads and helping them to perform patrols. I will have them retrieved now. Please go get teams Daisuke and Hideo. One hidden ANBU agent left the room while Naruto and Kakashi waited for them to return. The door opened abruptly, and two teams of shinobi came in. It seemed like Kusa used the same genin team system as Konoha, as there was one Jounin sensei per 3 genin. Naruto did feel a bit awkward, however, because the genin in the room were perhaps only a year or two younger than him. Practically speaking, he knew that there was nothing to be worried about since there had been far younger Jounin than him before, but something about it just seemed unusual. Additionally, it was a little weird that the head Jounin of Kusa, a man he had never met, recognized him immediately. It suddenly seemed like there were so many new things he would have to get used to. Teams Daisuke and Hideo, these are the Konoha shinobi that shall be assisting you in your mission. As you know the lay of the land, you will be in charge, but keep in mind that these men are highly respected allied Jounin and should be treated as such. Dismissed. They left the room, grouped together but with the two Kusa Jounin leading the way forward. My name is Daisuke Kazuhara, a shorter than average but somewhat muscular man said. He was about 2 to 3 inches shorter than Naruto with unruly brown hair, kind of like Kiba's except it flowed down instead of spiking upward. And I am Hideo Takugama, the other man said with a bow. He was a tall, muscular man whose black hair was hidden away by a bandana. He was obviously a very physical fighter judging from his body type. We will be splitting up, with my team heading toward a northwestern village not far from the border and Daisuke's team heading to the mouth of the Tsuya River and patrolling along its banks. We will patrol these areas for 2 weeks, keeping an eye out for IWA shinobi. The current rules of engagement are as follows. Should we find IWA nin have passed the traditionally accepted borders, we are to provide them a chance to leave. If they refuse, we are to trail them. We are not authorized to commence first conflict. Naruto and Kakashi nodded, then the man leaned in closer to his group of genin, seemingly staring all three of them in the eye at once. Are we clear? Hi sensei, they all three said. Daisuke simply gave a sideways glance at his group, whom all promptly nodded their heads. This is where we split up, Naruto. I think I'll go with the man proceeded to point between Hideo and Daisuke, humming something that was barely audible. It almost felt relieving to Naruto to see his sensei behaving a bit like his normal self. The man had been a bit too serious ever since the pain attack. Hideo. You shall patrol the river with Daisuke then. Kakashi put a hand on his shoulder and pulled him a little closer, before speaking softly into his ear. Be safe, Naruto. I know it's your first assignment as a Jounin, but just keep a cool head and you'll pull through. Thanks, sensei. Naruto's eyes lit up as he thought of something. By the way, he said, backing away from the man and reaching into his kunai pouch, pulling out one of his Hiraishin kunai he used during his training. Here, take this. I can't be sure the maximum distance I can travel, but it just seems like a good idea for you to carry one. The copy nodded before putting the object into his pouch. You should probably also take one as a precaution, he said toward Daisuke. So you are the Hiraishin kid then? You know, I thought it was you but I didn't want to say anything, the Kusanin said with a smile as he took the kunai, examining the formula on the handle closely. Naruto was not particularly worried the man would try to copy it or anything, since the shortened Hiraishin formula varied on an individual basis. The guy was probably just curious about the famous jutsu. After a few moments, he put it into his own pouch. Alright, well team, let's get going. Best of luck to you, Hideo. The teams left the village gates and immediately split off into separate directions. So, I didn't introduce myself properly. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. It made him feel a bit awkward that he had never actually told them his name. Or maybe it made him feel more awkward that they had never even asked. Right. It is good to meet you, Naruto, Daisuke said. You will have to excuse my genin here. They are unused to foreign shinobi, I suppose. They are usually somewhat more talkative. I'm Hitachi. Naruto looked at him. A young man, probably about a year and a half younger than him. A few inches shorter than him, lanky body, not seemingly very muscular. Brown hair, which seemed to be quite dominant within Kusa, with brown eyes as well. He had an energetic voice, a bit like Kiba or himself, Natsuko. A young woman whom he would guess was the same age as Itachi. Way shorter than him, probably 6 or so inches, with long flowing black hair and dark brown eyes. Her voice confident yet withdrawn, like a less forceful Sakura. Tadashi? Young man, almost the same height as him, probably same age as the other two. He had a muscular body and Naruto could plainly see a sword sheath on his hip. He also had brown hair but his eyes were green. His voice was hard to place, sounding like some odd mix of Kakashi and Guy. Cool with an underlying energy. They said their names one after another as if performing a roll call. Naruto did his best to try to memorize their names with their faces, as you never knew what could prove useful knowledge. I always like to get to know my teammates. What are you guys' strengths? I count myself as a ninjutsu specialist, with a wind element. Now that he thought about it, he really should put some training into learning some new simple jutsu. As nice as Shadow Clones, Raisengans, and Hiraishin are, it couldn't hurt to branch out a little bit. Maybe he'd get Kakashi to teach him a few things the next time they had the opportunity. Taijutsu ninjutsu mix, fire element. Daisuke said, seeming to comply with Naruto's wishes to have some sort of idea of what everyone was capable of at a basic level. These 3 are still genin, so I've been teaching them mostly the basics, except Tadashi knows some very basic kenjutsu. They are quite capable, just not very specialized, and they are planning to take the next Chunin exams in Konoha. Naruto nodded, in his mind learning a bit more about life in a smaller shinobi village. The team did not seem to have a Kekai Genkai user, as all of the successful teams from his graduating year did. Still, he had no doubt that with enough hard work they could be strong shinobi, like Rock Lee or Sakura. Are any of you from clans? Tadashi here is from a kenjutsu-focused clan, that's why he has a sword. He's not too experienced with it yet though, but in time I am sure he will become quite proficient. Hitachi and Natsuko are not clan shinobi, which is to say that they are not from established clans with sufficient influence in the village. What's Konoha like? One of the genin asked, and Naruto was pretty sure that it was Hitachi. He had curiosity written in his eyes, but both of his teammates glared at him a little bit. Suddenly, something clicked in Naruto's head. Kusa was a village known for its diplomatic niceties, and it seemed to him that it was mostly the Jounin's job to talk to him. He had noticed Daisuke jump in to speak for the genin a bit too much. Naruto was glad he had made the connection because he had thought that the kids were afraid of him, or something. Konoha is a very large village, with a lot of people and a lot of different clans. I don't think we're too different from any other village in how we operate though. We have an academy, Kage, Jounin, clan heads, all those things that I'm sure are no surprise. There are a few things that I think need to be fixed, but it's a place that I'm proud to call home. Even after we were attacked recently, with a large part of the village destroyed, the citizens continue to work together and endure while the shinobi work with them and try to recover. That's why I'm going to lead them and protect them as Hokage someday. They settled into a silence, advancing through the woods at a steady pace, though Naruto got the idea that the genin were exerting themselves a bit more than they should have had to and wondered about their conditioning. After a few hours, however, Daisuke broke the silence but spoke in a softer tone of voice that would not carry through the trees. The Tsuya River is a large portion of our border with Iwa. The river originates in Iwa and flows south before curving eastward through some lowlands, carving a valley, and ending in the land of waterfalls. It has a strong current, hence the name, and its canyon makes it impossible to pass by any method other than via bridge. In the last war, the Canopy Bridge was destroyed to force Iwa to navigate the heavier forests west of the river, where shinobi from Kusa and Konoha would have a natural advantage. We have since rebuilt the bridge, as it is a vital part of our economy. Naruto nodded, taking in the short history lesson. It seemed to him that if Iwa were going to start a war, then the bridge would be a good place to start, if it was as important as Daisuke made it seem. A shinobi would likely be able to get past the river valley with relative ease, using any number of techniques to get across. A caravan of supplies, however, would not be able to with any sort of efficiency. Plus, the roads to the forests to the west were likely not as well maintained and not good to travel on in rainy weather. You know, it occurs to me. Couldn't Iwa just use an earth jutsu to make an earth bridge across? It seemed a rather obvious question to ask, given the nature of the enemy that they were fighting against. And he was sure that, if Konoha had some vital bridge destroyed, then it would be entirely possible to get Yamato to build a sturdy wooden one. Yes, they certainly could. However, an earth bridge would be very chakra-intensive to build in the first place and would require at least a jounin. After that, they would need to keep a similarly skilled jounin on duty to ensure maintenance. After all, a bridge of earth would have a harder time dealing with the current of the Tsuya as well as withstanding foot traffic across it. Next, that jounin, who is on maintenance duty instead of fighting at the front, will need to be protected just in case a raiding party goes after him, so that's further resources diverted away from fighting, waiting for an enemy that may never come. An obvious advantage for us. In the last war they deemed it more worthwhile to simply try bypassing it. I am not sure if they would do the same this time. Naruto nodded, supposing that the explanation made sense. Apparently the bridge was worthy of protecting after all. There was a sudden lack of trees, and he saw the river valley perhaps another 100 yards or so in front of him, with a similar distribution on the other side. He could tell from the branch he stood on that the valley was rather wide, and he could hear the flowing current of the river if he concentrated hard enough. As far as he could see, there was no alternate crossing, natural or otherwise. It was, actually, quite a nice view, with the sun setting in the west creating a nice array of shadows among the trees. "We're at the border of Kusa, Taki, and Iwa," the female genin Natsuko said, and it was the first thing besides her name that Naruto could recall her saying. "If we set up camp nearby, and start patrolling tomorrow, then we'll see the bridge in about 4 days if we're being thorough," Tadashi said, and Naruto was beginning to get the notion that the kids were very professional for genin. Probably more professional than him, come to think of it. Then again, professionalism was one of the most overrated shinobi skills, if his personal experiences and training under Jiraiya taught him anything. Of course there was a time for it, such as at council meetings or when serving as Hokage, but what difference did it really make on missions? There are other shinobi assigned just to the bridge, right? It seems too important to leave unsupervised. Of course, Ayashi-sama has made sure there will always be a team there. It's our job to back them up, in an indirect way. Naruto nodded, glad to hear that they were not the sole group involved. Somehow, though he did not know them all too well, he did not think that being alone with a genin team at the outbreak of a war would be much fun. It was then that they came upon a slight clearing in the woods. This should make a great place to camp. "Everyone, you know what to do. Tadashi, get some firewood. Natsuko, set up the genin tents. Hitachi, prepare to cook. Naruto and I shall patrol the surrounding area. Does everyone understand?" "Hi, sensei," they stated, and the man simply shook his head with a smirk on his face. Naruto, for his part, was quite sure that these genin were the exact opposite of his team, quiet and respectful. Then again, it could have something to do with the fact he was a foreign nin, or possibly the idea of war getting to them already. Or quite possibly that his genin team was among the strangest in the history of the elemental nations. He would not throw that out as a possibility. "Your team seems much more respectful and focused than the average genin team," Naruto said, as he and Daisuke began their patrol. Naruto also decided to disperse about 10 shadow clones to help ensure their safety. He did not want to make it obvious that he was somewhat discomforted by their behavior, so instead, disguised it as a compliment. "Yes, they are quite the kids. It's funny, really. I've never been one for much formality or tradition, and I like to think I can be quite humorous, but I was assigned a group of kids who all value formality highly. Just the way it all works out, I guess. Hideo would love them, I'm sure of that, and his kids are a lot like me in a way. Talkative, at least. Perhaps not as good looking." Naruto chuckled a bit. He had gotten the idea that this guy would be a bit carefree from their first impressions, and it seemed like he was right. "But I guess the kids have a way of growing on you, so they are behaving a bit differently just because I'm a foreign shinobi, aren't they?" The man had pretty much said so earlier, but Naruto wanted confirmation. "Definitely, especially a foreign jounin. Especially the hero of the leaf. They don't want to say anything out of line, for fear of embarrassing themselves, a clan, or the village. Personally, you don't seem like the type of guy to let a genin get to ya, but you'd be surprised." Naruto laughed at this. While he was definitely not the kind to be seriously offended by anyone, in fact he would probably be goading the poor shinobi on, he could imagine what it would be like for one of them to say the wrong thing to someone like Niji before he changed. Or, much worse, they were to talk badly about the philosophy of youth. "I understand. In fact, I can already think of a few people who would act like that. Better safe than sorry, I suppose." They moved in silence as he thought about his new companions. Daisuke seemed like a decent enough guy, rather talkative with a bit of a sense of humor. He seemed to have the respect of his genin, though Naruto was not quite sure how hard that was with the way those kids behaved. In the end, he felt like there were definitely worse teams that he could have been assigned to work with for the mission. They had awoken early in the morning, with Tadashi and a Naruto shadow clone having taken the last watch of the night. Naruto had gotten used to leaving at least one clone on watch during many of his missions, and he was sure that the genin did not mind having a little bit of company throughout the night. Additionally, even if he was willing to trust the Kusanin, they were still shinobi and he was still a shinobi, so having a shadow clone to watch over himself while he was sleeping was probably a good idea. When he was sleeping normally, a shadow clone being dispelled suddenly from dying would wake him up every time whenever he got the memory. After all, you can never be too careful when surrounded by ninja. For 3 days and 3 nights, the mission was entirely without intrigue. Team Daisuke, with Naruto tagging along, made a slow path up the river, patrolling back and forth in an effort to assure maximum security. Thus far, they had not seen anything of particular interest. To Naruto, it was a little bit worrying. With all the reports of Iwa being seen more frequently along the border, and even crossing it, for him to have seen nothing seemed like the calm before the storm. Thus far in the day they had been patrolling for several hours. Did you say you were or were not from a clan? The kids had taken to asking increasingly personal questions, especially Hitachi. Naruto did not really mind and was glad to answer them. It meant that the genin were more comfortable around him than they initially had been. I guess technically I could be a part of the Uzumaki clan, but I don't think that really counts since they aren't an established group nowadays. I grew up as an orphan and lived by myself from the time I was 6 years old, so I'm pretty sure I do not count as a clan member of any kind. Wait, Uzumaki? But you don't have red hair like Hitachi was quickly interrupted by Daisuke. Your hair is blonde. The Uzumaki are renowned for having red hair, is what I believe Hitachi was asking. Right, Hitachi? The boy nodded, and though Naruto picked up that something was going on in front of him, decided not to push the subject now. It interested him though. Surely, before then, the kids had already known his name was Uzumaki. Perhaps they had just thought he was given the name as opposed to being born into it. Or maybe they were trying to discuss something more about it now that they were more comfortable, but Daisuke intervened. Yeah, I get the hair from my dad. Who's the toughest enemy that you fought? Well, I guess the easy answer would be Pain. After all, he had the Rinnegan and nobody else in the village could stop him. On my very first mission, however, I fought against a guy named Haku, who traveled with Sabuza Momochi. It was tough because I had met him before the fight and had come to think of him as a friend, and we had a lot in common. Not only all that stuff though, he was strong enough to have almost killed me and a teammate. There did not seem to be any harm in answering their questions. Besides, anything that could help pass the time would be appreciated. He still had 10 days of patrol left to do before he'd go back to Kusa, and even then he did not yet have orders to leave. It was tough, not knowing whether or not Tsunade had waken up yet. Do you have a girlfriend? Hitachi asked, a mischievous glint being shot toward Natsuko all of a sudden. He wanted to laugh a bit at the genin heckling one another, though in truth, the question made him slightly uncomfortable. It was funny how the world found a way to change in the blink of an eye. 1 second, Naruto was talking with some genin and thinking about how everyone was holding up back in Konoha. Whether or not Tsunade was awake, the situation with Kumo, if Sakura had been taking better care of herself, and what everyone else was doing. Were they doing missions or were they rebuilding the village? The next second, the 5 of them stumble upon obvious signs of combat. Kunai on the ground, craters in the ground likely from explosions, scratch marks on the trees, broken limbs, blood spatters everywhere. Signs of a brief yet intense engagement among shinobi. Alright team, we need to stay calm. There is a high likelihood that IWA teams engage friendly shinobi in combat, but we must not jump to conclusions. We need to be cautious moving forward. Even though Daisuke was putting on a more stoic front, Naruto could tell from the look on his face and the slight shakiness of his voice that the Kusa Jounin was rattled. It was hard to blame the man, since the scene they were looking at could indeed be the start of the next great shinobi war. Naruto himself was unsure how to feel about the sudden revelation, so simply resolved to continue forward. They followed the signs of battle and the blood trails, eventually coming to a small clearing. There, they saw 3 dead shinobi and, from the headbands, it was obvious that they were Kusanin. Looking around, there were signs of a very brief engagement. If it were a head-on shinobi brawl, then there would almost certainly be more damage caused to the surrounding area. Somehow, it was less damage than the area they had stumbled upon minutes earlier. This indicated that it was likely a second team of IWA Nin that was waiting for them. Walking up to one of the bodies, he looked for the fatal injury. He had cuts and bruises on his arms, but nothing too severe. On his back, however, there was a piercing blow of some kind through his torso. If I had to guess, I would say that IWA Nin engaged these Kusanin in the nearby forests. These shinobi attempted to make a fighting retreat, likely in order to inform someone of higher rank. Unfortunately for them, it appears that a different team of IWA Nin then laid an ambush at this location and the Kusanin were caught from 2 sides and quickly eliminated. What a shame it was, these shinobi cut down in their prime. They had not even gotten to go down fighting, instead being ambushed on 2 occasions, so they herded them and slaughtered them. Nobody bothered trying to correct Hitachi, because they could tell that he was correct. Naruto knew it was an effective way of fighting, and it was probably well planned by the IWA Nin, but something about it still gave him a disgusted feeling. There was no doubt in his mind about it, this was an act of war. And if IWA was willing to go to war with Kusa, then they were also going to war with Konoha. If they were willing to attack Kusa in Kusa territory already, then it meant they were probably confident. Well, I told you that there would be more of them. A voice rung out from the tree line, and suddenly, 3 IWA Nin appeared on a tree branch seemingly out of nowhere. Apparently they had been expecting them to follow the signs of combat into this area. Naruto mentally cursed at himself because he should have known. Why else would they have left the bodies lying around? If they wanted the attack kept a secret, they could have moved the corpses and covered up most of the collateral damage. It was very fortunate that they were confident enough to reveal themselves before attacking. I thought the plan was to lay an ambush. Arrogance kills, you know. One of the other IWA Nin seemingly scolded his apparent teammate, who simply rolled his eyes. Oh please, like we could lose against some Kusa shinobi. Look at them. They've got 3 kids. Naruto looked from the Nin back to Team Daisuke. The three genin were frozen up, fear on their faces, and he wondered if they had ever been in a true combat situation. Sometimes he had to remind himself that not every genin squad ended up fighting highly ranked missing Nin every other mission. Most normal genin shinobi their age were going to relatively safe villages overseeing protection for some rich family, or clearing bandits who had gotten a bit too strong or deadly, not fighting the demon of the mist. Even Daisuke looked frightened, though he was clearly more ready for a fight than the rest of his team. They have a Konoha Nin. And he looks familiar, the third shinobi said, getting his two teammates to focus on Naruto. At this point, he knew that he had to make a decision. Having the enemy recognize him and allowing them to make the first move could prove an extremely costly decision, especially with his Kusa teammates seeming a bit frozen and fearful. So, the wise thing to do was strike first. It was clear already from the way they had killed the prior team that IWA was not going to take it easy on them, and he had to assume that this was a conflict where only one side could walk away with their lives. Yeah, he kinda does. The shinobi were visibly leering at him, and he knew that it was time for a bit of a preemptive strike. The fact that they had not yet recognized him gave him a huge advantage in any fight with them, and it would be foolish to not seek to use such an advantage. Without a second more warning, Naruto jumped toward the three IWA Nin whose eyes went wide with surprise for a second at the unexpected action. Rasengan! He shouted, the blue orb spinning rapidly in his hand. The enemy shinobi were wise enough to evade the attack, and seconds later, his hand hit the branch they were previously standing on and shattered it into countless tiny pieces. He had not assumed that the attack would land. He simply wanted to start an engagement to get the enemy shinobi thinking about combat, and not his identity. Luckily, the attack succeeded in having a secondary effect. The enemy were separated, at least momentarily. It seemed that two of the shinobi had jumped backwards while the other jumped to the left. Daisuke, I need you and your team to handle him, he said, pointing to the lone shinobi. I can handle these two. There was a part of him, somewhere in the back of his mind, that knew Daisuke was technically in charge of the mission. However, he ignored it completely in favor of trusting his instincts. They had always gotten him through in tough situations, and it would be silly not to trust them here. He saw the man nod. Shadow Clone Jutsu. 10 clones appeared beside him, facing toward the lone shinobi and enforcing the idea that the three of them would not be reuniting anytime soon, while the original glared at the duo of enemies in front of him. The lone enemy seemed to take a second to process everything before making a hasty retreat backwards. Team Daisuke pursued and the shadow clones dismissed, leaving Naruto alone with the two IWA Nin. Well, that was unexpected. Maybe even clever. Still, a Jounin of IWA is more than a match for some Kusa Genin team. And two Jounin of IWA can handle any Konoha Nin. So, should I take this to mean that IWA is declaring war? He wanted to remove all doubt from the fight and from his mind. It was obvious that all the signs pointed to him being in the beginning stages of a large-scale conflict, but there was a lingering voice of doubt somewhere in his mind. He didn't want it to be true, but at the same time, he couldn't try to hide from the obvious. No matter how much he wanted there to be peace in the world, facts were facts. It was strange to see the two enemies smirk at him, seemingly self-confident. Naruto wondered if it was self-confidence from already having defeated the prior Kusa Nin. It's about time we put Konoha back in its place. Ever since the last war you people have been acting like it's your job to mingle in everyone else's business. Well, Sachikage-sama finally had enough of it. Naruto barely kept himself from sighing. How was it even possible to hold a grudge for 2 decades, especially a grudge that was going to end up getting your loved ones killed and force you to kill others? For the moment, he would have to ignore that. He had to finish these guys off then reunite with Daisuke. If his earlier guess was correct, there would be at least one more team of IWA Nin. And if this was the start of an invasion, who knew how many more there could be after that? Earth-style, rising stone spears. It seemed like the enemy were also not ones to waste time and wanted to get things started immediately. He felt the ground under him rumble only for a moment before jumping into the air. A split second later, spikes emerged from where he used to be standing. Earth-style, mud bullet. The other shinobi's mouth expanded and he beat his chest, forcing a large chunk of hardened mud to shoot directly toward him. Thinking quickly, Naruto created 4 shadow clones who appeared directly in front of him to absorb the damage. Landing back on the ground, he immediately created a dozen more shadow clones who pulled a kunai out from their pouches, making sure to cover the formula written on the handles as they charged at the enemy Nin. Earth-style, battalion spear charge. A large amount of spear-tipped projectiles raised from the ground and launched themselves at the quickly charging clones. Naruto got the impression that this was the jutsu that most likely killed the Kusa Nin they had found earlier. Although a few of the clones were incapable of escaping the attack, the rest of them managed to get into taijutsu range, where the IWA Nin began to engage them in fist-to-fist combat. Naruto had the distinct feeling that his clones were being underestimated. In a way, it felt unfair that the IWA Nin truly had no idea what was about to happen to them. He searched for the chakra of the kunais and quickly felt the connections. He could feel the 9 in front of him as well as one more, somewhere back to the west. Briefly, he attempted to connect to Kakashi's kunai, but it appeared that his theory was correct and that the copy nin was out of range. It was good to know that he was right, but he would need to test exactly how far the Hiraishin could extend in the future. With a moment of focus, he disappeared in a flash of yellow light. He reappeared in another flash, right next to a kunai and arm's length away from a very shocked Iwa nin. The enemy, however, was not going to be given a moment's reprieve. They had been all too willing to start this fight, and now he would be all too willing to end it. Rasengan! He shouted, slamming a quickly formed blue sphere into the enemy's stomach, their hands having been distracted by the taijutsu engagement. The orb ground into the opponent before exploding in a blast of chakra and knocking them a few feet away. With one dead, he disappeared again, reappearing once more next to a clone and somewhat to the side of the remaining shinobi. Naruto finished the man off quickly with another Rasengan. It was amazing how quickly he had managed to kill 2 enemy jounin. The fight had lasted maybe 2 minutes or so. The Hiraishin was truly a terrifying weapon. Looking at their bodies, he shivered slightly. They had been so confident, so sure in their abilities. And here they were, lying on the ground, never returning to whatever families or friends they may have had. 2 enemy shinobi. 2 shinobi, each with complicated lives of their own, likely both having people waiting at home for them to return. Yet they would never return. They had been killed by him. What were their crimes? They had none, just 2 shinobi following orders, taking the pride they had in their village and turning it into overconfidence on the battlefield. Before he could allow himself to contemplate things further, he remembered Team Daisuke. He quickly honed in on the kunai's chakra and flashed to the location, where he immediately attempted to get his bearings. He appeared next to Daisuke, whom had his 3 genin behind him, all in defensive stances. In front of him, about 20 feet or so on tree branches, were 4 Iwa nin. A few of these enemy were rather young, although Naruto had to remind himself that they were still around his age, so he assumed they were chunin strength but would try not to underestimate them in combat. Yellow flash. One of the opposing shinobi said before they all looked at each other and proceeded to retreat. Naruto, for his part, was surprised by the action. Sure, he realized that the bingo book entry said for shinobi to not engage him under certain circumstances, but there was a difference between reading it and seeing fully trained adult ninja fleeing. Seems that, despite their rhetoric, the Iwa nin did believe that discretion was the better part of valor. He stayed in a defensive stance for a moment, before figuring that they had actually gone away. It's a good thing that you showed up when you did. He led us right toward a backup team. I'm not sure we could have managed. But what about those shinobi you were fighting? Dead? Well, probably. I didn't really check. Naruto saw the genin's eyes widen and even Daisuke seemed a bit shocked. He did not understand why. Sure, he had not really wanted to kill them, but he had to win the fight while he had the advantage of surprising them with the Hiraishin. If the enemies had recognized his face from the bingo book, they probably would have been more careful of clones trying to fight with kunai, and it would have been more challenging. While normally he might be in the mood for such a challenge, it'd be a bit too careless with the genin squad relying on him. That quickly? Tadashi asked, and Naruto understood now that they were more surprised in the speed of the fight than the conclusion of it. He nodded, even though the question was probably rhetorical. So, what happened with you guys? Any injuries? It didn't look like anyone had been injured, and not much time had passed since they had separated, but he felt a bit protective over the genin since they were really in an unfair situation for them. No, there was barely any fighting at all. Just a few defensive jutsu before you arrived. Naruto nodded, glad to hear it. I can't believe it. Iwa nin are invading again. Konoha didn't even have the manpower to send a real shinobi team. What are we going to do? There was a panic in the nin's eyes, and Naruto could tell the poor genin was beginning to panic as the adrenaline of opponents to face wore out. Calm down, Hitachi. At a time like this, all we can do is our job. As your sensei, I need you to trust me when I tell you this. No matter how much is lost, you've never been beaten until you surrender. The boy nodded, seeming to have calmed down at his sensei's words. Naruto thought that they sounded like something the old man might have said at some point. What do we do now, sensei? Well, I believe that we should continue in our mission. We have an elite foreign jounin with us and a messenger bird can carry the news back to Kusa. The greatest service we can do for our village is to do as we were assigned. Does that sound reasonable to everyone? All the genin responded in the affirmative, but Naruto did not. Do you think that maybe you guys should go deliver the news directly to Ayashi-sama while I head to Kanabi in order to see the situation? I mean, this could be a full-scale war that we're in the middle of. This mission was assigned as a patrol, but a patrol cannot stop an invasion. Plus, I'm not sure how experienced you guys are as a squad, you know? IWA could be sending elite units here. With all respect, Naruto, surely you cannot expect us to abandon a mission simply because the parameters have changed. Our village needs us out here to help figure out and stop whatever exactly is going on. We cannot be sure of Iwa's true intent just yet. Naruto sighed, figuring that Daisuke had made a good point. If it were Konoha in immediate danger, would he flee the front line? No, not unless given very specific and convincing orders on why he should do so. That was part of the reason why it never crossed his mind that he should be the one to leave. Kusa was an ally and, as such, in need of protection just as much as Konoha. Yes, he would fight for Kusa as if it were Konoha itself, for the two's fates were now aligned. Thus, he could understand the stance that the man had taken. Right, of course. Guess I was just worried about you guys is all. Of course I could not expect you to want to do anything besides trying to do the most for your village. I'm the same way, I suppose. He offered, with a slight smile. You're a lot different than the other Uzumaki, Hitachi said before his eyes widened as if realizing what he had said. Daisuke looked at the young man with an underlying scowl but tried to keep a straight face. What other Uzumaki? He asked, curious as to both what family he could have possibly had in the village, and why it seemed like it was being kept a secret from him. This was the second time now that the Uzumaki name had been brought up, with strange reactions from all of those around him. Okay guys, seriously, before we're forced to fight more Iwa Nin and our lives are put in danger again, I want to know what Uzumaki you're talking about, and why you're keeping it from me. Daisuke coughed into his fist, undoubtedly a sign ordering his genin to let him answer. Well, you see, when Uzumaki was destroyed at the start of the Third Great Shinobi War, the surviving members of the clan spread throughout the continent in various ways. One of the members came to Kusa, asking for refuge for herself and her daughter. Our leader at the time accepted under one condition: the woman become a medic nin who put the village before herself. This was due to the fact that the woman had a strange Kekai Genkai, the ability to heal almost any injury with a single bite to her skin. She accepted the condition, though after a surprise attack rendered many injuries to both the shinobi and citizenry of Kusa, she worked herself literally to death and left her daughter an orphan. This made her a bit of a hero to the village, a foreign woman who gave her own life in aid to others. Anyway, her daughter was born with the same ability, and thus was also trained to be a shinobi. She proved to be a promising young genin, whom not only possessed her mother's healing abilities but also displayed a keen ability to sense chakra. One day, however, she abandoned her oath to the village, and Karen Uzumaki has been a missing nin ever since. A part of him had known, of course, that the Uzumaki remnants had spread throughout the elemental nations, with none going to Konoha due to feeling betrayed. The thought that he could actually meet one of them, however, was something that he always wanted to push back as far as possible. There was some part of him that thought if he had gone this far in his life without meeting any of his clan relatives, then he would be just as happy to go the rest of his life without meeting them. A part of that changed when he began to believe, for a moment, that he was so close to meeting one of them here in Kusagakure. Someday, he resolved, he would do his best to meet one of them, be it Karen or somebody else. Alright, thanks. Nothing too complicated there, really. Had a clan member here who betrayed the village and became a missing nin. Not sure why you bothered to try to keep that a secret. We just didn't want to bother you with such information. After all, who wants to hear all about a village's missing nin? And the last thing we'd ever want is to relate you to a traitorous missing nin. Now, Ayashi-sama is relying on us to get our mission done, so I suggest we get a move on. Kanabi Bridge is not that far away. He prepared himself mentally for the task ahead, smiling at the challenge presented before him. It was not every day that someone like him got the opportunity to do something that was truly important. Most of the time, they were simply used as cannon fodder in the heat of battle. Though he knew his time on the planet was quite limited, there was a certain degree of freedom in accepting that simple truth. In his short time in existence, he had decided upon one thing: he would be as useful as possible. Right now, he had been entrusted with a singular goal and was ready to execute it. He felt the kunai spinning in his hand, feeling the chakra from it. He reached into the pouch, grabbing 5 more, holding all 6 in total between his fingers. He threw it toward the top of the bridge with a smile. In a flash of yellow, he appeared slightly above the bridge and could feel the heads of the Iwa nin turning towards him. Good. He could make out already hand signs being made, so knew he had not even 1 second to hesitate. The reaction speed of these enemies seemed to be rather good. Definitely not genin level reaction time. He reached out and grabbed the kunai he had thrown, immediately throwing it to the ground and appearing in front of an Iwa nin who looked afraid. Before the nin could react, he was hit with a strong uppercut. Immediately afterwards he jumped to the left, dodging earth projectiles of some kind. Taking a quick glance around, he could see that there had to be about 30 or so people just on the bridge. He threw 2 of the remaining kunai down the south end of the bridge with 2 more going towards the north. They were not intended to strike, but rather to spread out. With a speed that most shinobi would never imagine having to go up against, he flashed between the various kunai, dodging a series strikes and jutsu while delivering mild attacks against the Iwa nin. Thankfully, the enemy were limited in their jutsu arsenal due to the risk of friendly fire. His goal was not to kill these particular shinobi, for there were too many for him to accomplish this task, but rather to anger them. An angry enemy was not a rational one, and it would not take long for his use of the Hiraishin combined with being unscratched to cause some frustration. And so, he went back and forth, briefly engaging enemy shinobi, focusing most of his efforts on not getting hit. After a couple of minutes of this, he moved on to the next stage of the plan. Throwing a kunai into the air, he felt out the chakra signature and in another moment was himself up into the air, grabbing the kunai immediately and slinging it off of the bridge into IWA territory on clear grounds. An instant later, and he went from being high in the air above the bridge to being on the ground some hundreds of meters away. The IWA Nin, of course, had been watching and did not relent in attempting to attack him. There were more now, coming from the forests not too far away as well as the bridge. Never before had he seen so many hostile shinobi in one place. In a way, it was terrifying, yet at the same time, it was exhilarating. Now it was time to do something different. Once again, he threw a kunai high into the air and appeared next to it. Instead of disappearing somewhere else, however, he pulled 5 more kunai out of his pocket and threw them in a wide spread toward the ground. Tajua Kage Shuriken Jutsu, he yelled, as the 5 kunai multiplied into hundreds and peppered the ground in kunai. It took a lot out of him to use the jutsu on such a scale, and immediately upon feeling the chakra feedback from the hundreds of kunai he felt his head begin to hurt and had a general sense of being overwhelmed. If there were any chance he could continue to excel at his mission, he was going to need get past it. The battlefield was now his. He could move almost anywhere on it in the blink of an eye. And so he did, flashing between kunai nearly instantaneously and landing repeated taijutsu and kunai strikes on the IWA Nin spread throughout the battlegrounds. He was feeling tired already, a feeling he had not even been sure he was capable of feeling. "What are you idiots doing?" An authoritative female voice yelled out. "None of you are qualified to fight a Hiraishin user, especially not once he's created a field of kunai. Retreat!" The IWA Nin began to flee backwards in the woods quickly, though Naruto attempted to strike as many of them as he could in the time it would take them to follow through with the seeming order. The bridge had been mostly cleared of IWA Nin, except for those who had most likely been explicitly told not to leave it. That's when a girl exited the forest, looking right at him. She had short black hair, a confidence in her walk that made him know from instinct alone that she was strong, and quite oddly, pink-colored eyes. She was smirking at him. "Oh? Happy to see me?" He taunted a bit, catching his breath. Having exhausted himself already from the rather extensive and unusual battle that had taken place, he was not feeling entirely too confident in dealing with an IWA Nin who clearly wanted the chance to take on the Hiraishin. "You have no idea. I cannot believe I have the luck of running into you so early on in this endeavor. All my life, I've heard about the deadliness of the Hiraishin and seen my grandfather curse the jutsu into the dirt. Well, now I get to see what it's all about." She maintained a casual stance as Naruto continued to eye her closely. Without warning, she took a deep breath. "Lava release, lave flow," she said, lava bursting from her lips and spewing in a stream onto the battlefield. Encountering a lava user had definitely not been something on his agenda. The attack decimated the ground, and the substance itself was hot enough to disperse his kunai when it came into contact. Next thing he knew, the woman charged straight across the lava toward him, casually running on its surface as though it had been nothing. He could see that the lava was slowing but not stopping and would continue to destroy the jutsu-created kunai. Normally, shadow kunai were strong enough to withstand glancing blows and contact with the enemy, but they were definitely not made to deal with a lava-style technique. She took the offensive, attempting to use taijutsu and doton jutsu to land a hit on him. Instead of engaging with her, however, he continued to use the Hiraishin to avoid her pursuit. For 5 minutes the fight went on this way, him avoiding her with relative ease even as she attempted to engage in some sort of straightforward fight. He could tell that she was not necessarily putting all of her effort into the assault but was holding something back likely in case he managed to use Hiraishin to get behind her or to do something else unpredictable. She was holding back, waiting for him to make a move while he was simply avoiding her. Briefly, he wondered how boring the fight between the two of them was. Despite all the confidence she had seemed to have heading into the battle, it was clear that she was attempting to feel him out and build a familiarity with his combat behaviors before committing more to attacking. Even though it was not the most intensive fight of his career, using the Hiraishin constantly while dodging attacks was taking a toll on his already tired state, and he was exhausted by this point. He created a lot of distance then fell down on one knee, panting. She approached him with a smirk on her face but did not get too close. "You know, really I expected more from you. To wear yourself out so quickly without even landing a punch is pathetic." He smiled at her. "You didn't land a punch either, you know." "True enough, does not seem like it hurt me this time." He knew that he had managed to get under her skin a bit with his remark because the smirk on her face had died out. Suddenly, from near the bridge behind him, he heard an incredibly loud sound as if a raging wind and could practically feel powerful chakra emanating from the location. He smiled brightly, then, knowing that his task had been done and that his existence had not been for nothing. "The boss will be proud of me." "Huh! What are you?" Naruto vanished in a puff of smoke. "Hiraishin Shuriken!" Naruto yelled, the most powerful jutsu in his entire arsenal wielded in his right hand. Although he had promised Tsunade not to use the technique on account of how dangerous it was, he knew there was some way to truly master the attack. Unfortunately, he had not had much time to give it any additional work on account of learning the Hiraishin, and even midair he could feel the intense pain spreading through his arm due to the uncontrolled wind chakra. For the present, it was the only way to ensure that the bridge would be destroyed. Based on what Daisuke had told him about the Kanabi Bridge, it was built sturdily, and he could not risk losing his one opportunity of surprise. He had sent a clone to clear out most of the shinobi on the bridge, not by engagement, but by distraction, using Iwa's fear and hatred of the Hiraishin to his advantage in order to divert them from the main strike. Meanwhile, he had advanced through the Kusa side of the forests at a slow pace, trying to prevent any unnecessary engagements with Iwanin in order to get close enough to ensure he would not lose control of the jutsu before making contact. As he did that, Team Daisuke would be establishing a safe perimeter a good distance away where they would then meet up and head back to Kusa following the bridge's destruction. They were not entirely happy with their role in the bridge assault, wanting instead to play a more direct part, but he had managed to assure them that it would be easier and safer if they ensured a safe escape. A part of him was made extremely nervous by all of this since it was his plan and anything negative that happened as a result of it was his responsibility. The S-rank jutsu made clean contact with the side of the bridge, digging into it as Naruto released it from his grasp. He fell backwards, toward the ground, as the attack dug its way deep into the reinforced concrete of the structure. He could hear the concrete and other materials being ground away by the intense wind jutsu. Landing on the ground, he looked at his arm to see a series of cuts and bruises all down it. It was not as bad as it had been following the Kakaza fight, thankfully, due to the fact that he had only used one of the attack here compared to several in that encounter. Randomly, a thought occurred to him to help hasten the healing in case he should need to fight again. He called upon a rather small amount of the Kyuubi's chakra, which he had been made to have easier access to during his training trip with Jiraiya, and attempted to focus it into his right arm. Suddenly, his arm became encased in red chakra as often happened when he drew upon the fox's power. The pain quickly began to subside and he let out a sigh of relief. Maybe this was one of the ways it could be possible to prevent the Raisin Shuriken from tearing apart his arm. It was incredibly dangerous to risk using the power, but if it enabled him to use his most powerful jutsu, then maybe it was worth it. There would be time to think about it later. For now, he flashed out of the river valley and back into the woods, where he had a small force of 50 clones prepared. There was a huge explosion of chakra as the attack finally destabilized in the bridge, the densely packed wind chakra bursting violently in every direction. Chunks of concrete were thrown in every direction, with one going nearly 30 feet into the air. He couldn't help but smile a bit as he watched the ninjutsu in action. An S-rank jutsu of such immense power, and he had invented it. He was the only person in the entirety of the elemental nations capable of performing it. As the bridge collapsed around it, a giant chakra dome formed in the middle that continued expanding as more and more of the structure was destroyed. After another 30 seconds, the jutsu was finished. In its wake, over half of the Kanabi Bridge had been totally destroyed, a huge portion missing in the middle that would undoubtedly take a substantial time investment to repair. Alright clones, teams of 5. 5 teams defend this area from any vengeful Iwanin. The rest of you sweep into the woods looking for those who have already crossed. For Konoha. They gave an enthusiastic hi before heading out, and yet again he was reminded of the incredible power of the Shadow Clone Jutsu. Reconnaissance, training, diversion, brute numbers, the Jutsu seemed to constantly keep a world of opportunities open. If just one of his shadow clones had proven capable of distracting the Iwanin in a few minutes, would 50 of them each supplied with a fair bit of chakra be able to actually hold their own? How strong, exactly, was one of his shadow clones? Obviously they were not as strong as him, since they could not take a hit, but were they B-ranked, A-ranked? Something else to add on to the ever-growing list of things he wanted to know in order to be a better shinobi. He mentally searched for the farthest chakra signal and flashed to Team Daisuke's location. Kanabi Bridge destroyed, he said to the spread-out team of 4, though of course he was situated directly next to Daisuke who, from the surprised look on his face, was not quite used to the suddenness of the Hiraishin's transportation. Wow, you're really something else, aren't you? Glad you're on our side, Daisuke said, with a smile. Alright team, it's time we head back to Kusagakyur and report to Ayashi-sama with everything we've seen and done. By the time the 5 of them arrived back to Kusa, it was turning to nighttime and all of them were tired. For Team Daisuke, it had undoubtedly been an incredibly stressful day to have to deal with the seeming invasion of their homeland, but they were also quite tired due to how quick of a pace that was encouraged for the travel back. Naruto was worn out a bit due to having used the Raisin Shuriken, but most of his exhaustion was undoubtedly from his brief use of the Kyuubi's chakra on his arm. Bringing out that chakra always had a way to affect him much more than anything else. There was also the fact that he had lost 50 shadow clones worth of chakra, though they had seemed to prove more than a handful for their opponents. It did not take long at all for them to reach the head governmental building and, to Naruto's immense surprise, there was not considerably more activity than there had been when he was previously here. That could only mean one thing: some way, somehow, Ayashi had not yet been informed of the attacks by Iwagakure. If he had been, then there would surely be many more people running through the building attempting to organize a strategy to fight the opponent. They reached Ayashi's office and knocked, finding themselves immediately admitted. Ayashi-sama, Daisuke began, Getting the man's attention, I'm afraid that I have some incredibly urgent news. Yes, what is it? The man said, looking extremely worried. On our mission to patrol the Tsuya River, we encountered IWA Nin that had murdered a group of our own shinobi. After a brief period of combat between ourselves and 2 teams of IWA Nin in that area, we were able to drive them away. Afterwards, we decided to check on Kanabi Bridge, to ensure that it had not fallen into enemy hands. When we first got eyes upon the bridge, however, it was clear to us that there were many more shinobi upon it than we would be able to station. After confirming that IWA Nin were in total control of the area, Uzumaki-san proceeded to destroy the bridge in an attempt to prevent IWA from using it. Sir, we believe that there is indisputable evidence that we are experiencing an invasion from Iwagakure. The village head nodded, eyes closed, seeming to take in every word and attempting to make sense of it. He sighed. I understand. Genin, please leave the room. We may have to discuss things that are a bit above your pay grade. Hitachi, Natsuko, and Tadashi left without any fuss, seeming to have little desire to discuss the very real war that seemed to be ready to unravel around them. Now then, while we have much to discuss, there is something that we need to take care of first. The man stood up, walking around the desk and taking a few steps toward them. I must express my gratitude for everything you have done in my service so far, he said with a smile, while getting slowly closer. Naruto began to feel every instinct in his body instruct him that something was not quite right, but he could not actually process what was wrong. It was then that he saw Daisuke briefly look past them, to his bodyguards at the back of the room, then back to them. Yes, something was absolutely horrendously wrong. Thank you, the man said with a bow. Suddenly there was a burst of action from behind them. Naruto immediately ducked and attempted to perform a sweeping leg kick out of self-defense. When his opponent attempted to grab his leg with both of his hands, he felt 2 needles prick into his skin. He backed off, to the corner of the room, as he saw Daisuke getting stabbed in the back and dropping to the ground. Why? He asked Ayashi, now in a fighting stance. Though, admittedly, feeling a little bit lightheaded. Incredibly fast-acting poison, 100% lethality. Used only for cases of certain kills in order to prevent anyone finding an antidote. Daisuke never was one of my bigger supporters, so having him die here was a bit of a net positive. Killing you is also a major plus. I can't even imagine how much IWA will appreciate it. If he were in control of himself, he would have noticed that his leg had gone numb. At the moment, however, it was hard to process that due to the absolutely blinding rage he was experiencing. He was doing everything he could think of to control it, but as he kept looking at Daisuke's body, motionless on the floor and soon to be a corpse, he could not experience anything other than anger for the man who had been betrayed by someone he was supposed to be able to rely on. Although shinobi may die following the orders of their leader, for a leader to deliberately order one's death simply out of convenience was inexcusable. He felt himself grating his teeth together. You're the leader of Kusugakure, an ally of the Leaf. Why would you do this? He spat out, furiously wanting an answer. There was an attempt to calm himself, but then he remembered that Hitachi, Tadashi, and Natsuko would never see their sensei again. The Leaf's not the right side to be on right now. Weakened from an attack with the world ready to take advantage. Losing diplomatic influence, not able to support its allies, struggling to rebuild its own hidden village. It is clear, to me, that Konoha is the wrong alliance. Being an opportunist, I saw the chance to take my village straight into the top 5. So I set up this little invasion ploy with IWA, to draw in a few Konoha nin and to dispose of a few people who may not approve of my actions. With Konoha and Suna out of the picture, or at least crippled, then not only would we immediately become one of the 5 great ninja villages, but the missions that we could begin to take over from them would allow us to comfortably stay in the position for the foreseeable future. And for my wise leadership in a time of turmoil, I would become the Shodain Kusakage. Now do us all a favor and drop dead already. This man, in front of him, one of the Kage. A man willing to murder his own loyal shinobi, a man to whom an alliance meant nothing but convenience, and was meant to be broken at any time. The entire idea was disgraceful to the extreme, and Naruto found himself seeing red in a way that he had not in a while. He had come here with the mission of aiding Kusa in any way possible, and what had happened? He had been betrayed. Daisuke had been betrayed. Konoha had been betrayed. And all because of the man in front of him, so confident that a poison would kill him that he'd talk about it all. It was now that he felt the fox's chakra beginning to envelop him, subconsciously being called upon by him, but this time he would not fight it. Instead, he immediately embraced it and called for more. Moments later, Naruto went from trembling with anger, which Ayashi had assumed was the poison working its way from the leg, to being encased in glowing red chakra with 2 tails swishing behind him. Never in his entire life had he been in such complete agreement with the Kyuubi. The 3 others in the room with him were going to die. There was nothing more to it. With white-hot anger, he struck out at the 2 guards whom had attacked him and Daisuke. With such speed that the 2 surely did not comprehend what happened, he was behind them with a chakra tail enveloping each of their heads. With a quick twist, they were dead and their bodies were thrown forcefully into the walls, staining it with blood. Jeijin Shuriki, this is, This is unexpected, the man stumbled in fear, seeming only now to understand that he had misbehaved in some way since it was clear he was going to die. He took a few steps backward, as if attempting to put some space between them, but there was nowhere left to go after 3 steps, and the beast stood before him snarling in a way that was menacing beyond any human ability. You dared to make a mockery of the Kage? Were the last words Ayashi ever heard before claws dug their way into his chest and slammed him against the wall, going deeper and deeper into him before his lungs were pierced entirely. He couldn't even scream as his life was drained by the oxygen deprivation and blood loss. In a few minutes he had gone from ready to gloat about his grand scheme to finally break Kyuzugakuya into the top 5 to being a corpse lying on the ground. Naruto looked at it in disgust, before realizing the sheer brutality of what he had done. He drew himself into his mindscape in order to think. Even in his own mind, however, he could not escape the rage that had consumed him. Even with Kyuubi's chakra not surrounding him in here, his sheer disdain for Ayashi's actions made him dwell on it. How could one man be so greedy, so cold, so arrogant, with so little care for integrity or honor? Sure, maybe he had met plenty of people who could fall into those categories, but none of them had ever been the leaders of an important hidden village. In his anger, Naruto found himself aimlessly walking forward until he found himself walking toward the Kyuubi's cage within him. He saw no sign of the beast, though its chakra tainted the floor and gave the air a bit of a foul smell. It made sense. He had drawn upon its chakra twice in one day. But if his mindscape was tainted with Kyuubi's chakra, did that mean his own thoughts were affected by the chakra? No, that couldn't be right. He was quite certain that he wanted to kill Ayashi of his own accord. Not everybody was meant to be saved, not everyone had some sort of light in them like Nagato that led to misguided actions. No, people like Ayashi, who were willing to use everyone to get what they want, who would betray anyone, who would put on a performance of caring, they could not be helped. The man had no intention of ever trying to better the world but only to better himself. As far as he was concerned, Ayashi may as well have been Orochimaru. He was now standing directly in front of the gate, and still saw no sign of the gargantuan beast. How far back, exactly, did things go past that gate? Then, he began focusing on something else entirely. The seal on the front of the gate. It was right in front of him, the seal that could free the Kyuubi from its confinement. What would happen if the Kyuubi were to be let free? It would probably go on some sort of rampage, destroying Kusa entirely before finding some other people to menace. So what, exactly, was the difference between a tailed beast and the rest of the world then? Why didn't they take people like the Tsuchikage and have them sealed away, to never kill again? He reached out a hand and touched the seal, tracing along the edge. When you thought about it, it hardly seemed fair that a tailed beast should be imprisoned for killing without reason when so many others were free to do it. Hey, I really think you should not do anything with that seal, a voice said from behind him, startling him greatly and interrupting his thoughts entirely. I wasn't doing anything, I swear, he said hastily, before getting a good look at the man who seemed to materialize out of nowhere. Suddenly, he found himself almost out of breath as he looked into the eyes of someone he knew there was never a chance of him meeting. Hello, Naruto, the man said, bright smile on his face, eyes closed, head tilted. D-Dad? D-Dad? Naruto said, not quite believing his eyes. There, standing before him, was the Yondaime Hokage of Konoha, Minato Namikaze. His father. It was strange really how his own father could look only about 5 or 6 years older than him. So, I see that means they told you about me after all. You know, I had my doubts. The man was smiling brightly as Naruto walked toward him. As he got closer, his father extended his arms as if to receive a hug. Perhaps, then, he was a bit surprised to receive a punch to the stomach. That's for the Kyuubi, he said, remembering all the trouble the fox had caused him throughout his life. From villagers to the Akatsuki, being a Jinchuriki had certainly been a pretty constant struggle for him. Granted, it was never actually the Kyuubi's fault, so it was not really fair to get that upset about it. Perhaps, really, he kinda liked the idea of being able to punch his father. That made sense. He had just landed a sucker punch on the Yondaime himself. He smiled to himself, feeling good just from the thought of getting to roughhouse a bit with his father like every other kid. He reached his arms around the other man, who was bent over from the unexpected hit, and wrapped him into a tight hug. And this is for Hiraishin. And cause I kinda just want to. The other man returned the embrace, and for a moment, Naruto let himself enjoy the sensation of being able to hug his father. You've thought about that punch a while, haven't you? His dad said, seemingly not angry but perhaps a bit upset, though not at him. I promised myself, not too long after I first learned of the Kyuubi, that if I should somehow ever get the chance then I would do it. Of course, I was a bit mad at the village for how they treated me and I had been betrayed by my sensei. And maybe being a Jinchuriki is kinda cool in some ways, but a promise is a promise. He was smiling now, as his father extended their arms and held him at arm's length. So much like your mother. Vicious yet kind. I guess my last wish to have you treated like a hero didn't exactly work out as hoped, huh? The man wore a sort of grimace, seemingly regretting what he had done. Well, not as you planned, I'm sure. But don't worry about that. I'm the recently crowned hero of the Leaf. Okay, he could not resist the urge to brag to his father about his accomplishments. Maybe by his age, most people would have stopped, but he had to make up for lost time. So, don't take this the wrong way, but how are you here? In my last moments, I guess I got a bit creative. I used my own chakra to create an emergency failsafe just in case you ever started wanting to release the QB. I don't really have that long to talk. It was a small amount of chakra. I wasn't going to do it. I was, well, just thinking. If everyone else is free to kill and cause havoc, why not the Biju? Well, for one, releasing it would kill you, and I don't really want my son to die. Call it overprotective, I guess. Funnily enough, the man had a bit of a mischievous smile, and Naruto got the idea that his father was quite the humorous person in his own right. Second, I didn't really have much choice in the matter at the time. It was either seal the QB or everybody died. Maybe it felt wrong to seal a sentient being inside of my own son, who appears to be sentient as well, but there's an important lesson in it all. Sometimes, you have to do what's wrong to do the most right. Oh, but don't become some genocidal maniac because of that. It's really not applicable all that often. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. I'll try not to think about it too much right now. Good. Now, I'm guessing that there's something that triggered all this thought. Why don't you tell your old dad about it? His father seemed to be nothing but smiles, and it really had a way of making him feel good. His dad was clearly so excited to see him, and it helped to kill all those thoughts he once had about his parents not wanting him. Sure, Sandame and Tsunade could tell him that his dad would have loved him, but it was entirely different to feel it. Of course, he knew he had a stupid grin on his face too. Well, you see, this issue started when I learned the Hiraishin. Immediately after I learned it, probably a little over 2 months ago, I had to use it to fight a Rinnegan user named Nagato, who was the leader of a group of S-class criminals that wanted to catch all of us Jinchuriki. He managed to destroy a large part of the village, but I convinced him he was wrong and he brought everyone he killed back to life. Anyway, right after that, IWA and Kumo started to act a bit too aggressive towards our allies in Kusa and Hoshi, and the council seems worried that it means we're about to go to war and that it has something to do with me learning Hiraishin. Kakashi-sensei and I were sent to Kusa in order to reinforce them, and we split up to the 2 most likely areas to be attacked. The team I was with found a dead Kusa squad and were ambushed, and we took that to mean Kusa was being invaded. We made our way to Kanabi Bridge, and I destroyed it with a Raisin Shuriken. Oh, that's Rasengan combined with Wind Chakra. After that, we made our way back to Kusagakure and reported to the leader. He betrayed us, having both of his bodyguards attempt to poison myself and Akusa Jounin. They did it, but it didn't really work on me because of the QB. I used some QB chakra to kill him and his bodyguards, and now I'm here. His father was looking at him kinda wide-eyed, and Naruto thought that he may have rambled a bit too much and not been clear enough. You've led an eventful life, haven't you, son? He rubbed the back of his neck. Haha, how'd you guess? Fatherly instinct. Learning Hiraishin, fighting the Rinnegan, mastering the Rasengan. I couldn't be more proud. He felt like a 5-year-old kid, having his father say those words to him, and his eyes lit up in pure delight. I'm not too surprised to hear that Kusa's village leader would do such a thing. They were considered the 6th best village at the end of the Third War, and it was probably just a matter of time before they had a leader who tried to be a bit too clever in moving up. Oh hey, so, I just realized that I killed the leader of Kusa and that, in reality, I'm probably standing above his body with his blood on my hands. Shouldn't I take care of that problem real quick? I'm pretty sure that, since we're in your mind, things are moving much more slowly in here than they are out there. Not a big deal. Ah, really? Okay then, anything else happen in Konoha I should know about? Well, Tsunade Bachan's the Hokage, but she's been out of action since the last attack. As much as I'm sure we both love to keep talking politics, I think I've got a good picture. IWA and Kumo causing trouble, Kusa's turned traitor, Hokage out of action. It seems rough, but there is not much I can say about it without knowing more. I'm going to disappear soon and never show up again, so I shouldn't really waste this time I'm given. You mentioned earlier that you just learned Hiraishin 2 months ago, correct? Yeah. Had this long training trip up in Mount Myaboku and everything. Mount Myaboku? Have you done sage training? I would guess that the way I designed the seal to work should make senjutsu impossible. That's what Jiraiya said. Haven't tried it. So, Hiraishin? Right, distracted, sorry. So much I wish I could hear. Anyway, I'm going to guess you've only learned the basics of the jutsu. Kunai formula and kunai-based teleportation, right? Well, if you can call that basic. So, that means I can bet that there are 2 extremely effective uses for it that you have not quite figured out yet. Applying the formula to opponents with simple skin contact, and the ability to teleport enemy jutsu like I did with one of the QB's attacks. Am I right? I haven't really had the time to work on those yet, sadly. Been busy ever since I learned the jutsu, whether in rebuilding Konoha or in my mission to Kusa. Guess I do need to find some time somewhere to keep training. It's hard to describe how to apply the formula with physical contact. It took me a generous amount of work to figure it out. Let's see, oh, I know. Do you know how, when performing summoning jutsu, a string of kanji appears temporarily that coincides with the release of the chakra? His dad was not really asking him a question, he was no longer smiling. He was talking as a teacher does to a student, like Irika-sensei had. Basically, what you need to do is to find a way to replicate the chakra pattern on the kanai with the chakra in your body, then to release it in such a way that it results in the formula becoming a part of the person. Ideally, you want to use as little chakra as possible when doing this so that the opponent is less likely to detect anything. It may seem easy to replicate the formula doing hand signs, and that's not a bad place to start, but you need to train yourself past using hand signs in order for it to be truly effective. Okay, yeah, that makes sense, I guess. Naruto almost wished that he had a notebook, but he was sure he could remember everything his father said during their first meeting, he was sure of it. Besides, this was taking place in his mind, so how was it possible for him to forget? Now, in order to use it to deflect attacks, well, that's not actually part of the Hiraishin. I mean, sure, it's a possible use for it, but it is not integrated into it. The way I did it was actually simple. I concentrated chakra into my hands and extended a wave of chakra forward, expelling small amounts while keeping it connected to my hands. Do you know a hyuga? I recommend a hyuga for learning this. Anyway, when you feel confident that the attack has made contact with your chakra, you disconnect the chakra flow from one hand, Hiraishin away, and in the split second you're using the Hiraishin, you move your other hand in the direction you want to divert the attack. If an attack is particularly deadly or fast, you want to extend your chakra as far out as possible in order to, not die horribly. Naruto's face was pale, and he knew it. It seemed like a tall task to be able to learn to use the Hiraishin in such a way, but he knew that it had to be worth it. His father managed to deflect a direct attack from a tailed beast using the technique, which was surely enough of a testament to its effectiveness. It was going to be an extreme test of his chakra control in order to pull it off. His father smiled at him again, probably to try to relieve his fears. Don't worry about it too much, just think about it this way. It will be great to hone your reflexes even further, and that is helpful in a wide variety of ways. Also, you're gonna want to start small, probably with a blunted kunai or something. Oh, and before I forget, I'd been thinking a little bit about your senjutsu dilemma, and a thought occurred to me. If you were to challenge the kyubi for its chakra, then manage to successfully secure a portion of it, it may be possible to then divert the chakra that your body naturally absorbs from the seal into that reservoir, making your chakra able to support the sage chakra. I can't be certain, since your seal is one of a kind, but that might work. You are really into chakra theory, had Dad? He'd always heard that the yandame was a genius, that the man had an understanding of chakra that was far beyond most shinobi. Meeting him for the first time, he could now confirm it for himself. It was the love of my life. Besides your mother, of course. Chakra makes the impossible possible, and I wanted to understand it better than anyone ever had. That was what I always had in the back of my mind driving me, even as I became a jounin, sensei, Hokage. So, son, what drives you? What's your dream? I'm going to be the strongest Hokage, he said, without taking even a moment to consider that he was talking directly to the man who would probably have been the strongest Hokage had he lived a longer life. Even with a shortened life, some people still made the argument. And I'm going to find some way to bring about peace, just like I promised Jiraiya and Nagato. Bring about peace, huh? A dream as old as the shinobi lifestyle. Just remember, in times of war people crave peace, in times of peace people crave war. It's a strange world you live in, Naruto. There's going to be a lot of work to get that done. But it's your dream, so I'll believe in you just as Jiraiya-sensei once believed in me. Things sound kinda tough out there right now, but maybe somehow this situation with IWA and Kumo will work toward your goal. But how am I supposed to change things and create a permanent peace? Even after a war there's as much hatred as there was during, no matter who wins or loses. Why are you asking me? I never managed it. Nobody has. It's up to you to figure that out, and it definitely won't be easy. I'll just have to make it work. Is that so? Well then, I worry for IWA and Kumo. Now, about that other dream. Consider this a bit of a challenge. If you've not surpassed me by the time you're 22, then it won't count. Think of it as leveling the field on my behalf, since I'm dead and all that. You mentioned Kakashi, right? He can be the judge. Deal. You don't stand a chance, old man. He resolved now to train himself even harder than ever before. There was no way he could possibly fail the only challenge his father issued him. You're so much like your mother, it's silly. Oh hey, that reminds me. There is actually a way you'll get to meet her, just like you met me. When I was designing your seal, low on time as I was, I imagined a day where you'd attempt to challenge it for chakra and wanted you to have a bit of help. I don't know if you know this or not, but your mother was the previous Kyubi Jinchuriki. Unlike your status, I assure you, hers was an absolute secret that almost no one knew of in Konoha. I'm afraid we have to wrap this up, Naruto. I can feel my chakra depleting. Naruto's eyes went wide. Here he was, having just met his father and not really having time to goof around with him due to the events of the world, and it was almost over. There was one more thing, however, that he knew he could not leave without the answer to. Dad, what happened on that night, when I was born? The young Kage sighed. Well, you see, childbirth is naturally the most dangerous time for a female Jinchuriki due to the seal being weakened by the development of another chakra system within the body. Meanwhile, the host's body is also weakened naturally by the process. With the seal not functioning properly and a host that is not capable of resisting fully, it is possible for the Biju to break free by flooding as much chakra as possible at the seal. I cannot be sure exactly what went wrong on that night because the Uzumaki were secretive to the point of paranoia and designed the seal to never be visible past the night it was created. If I had to guess, I would think the original seal creator perhaps wrote one kanji slightly wrong, or he just did not have enough chakra to put into the seal. Don't worry though, with your seal you're free to have as many kids as you want, he said, with a wink and a laugh. Not funny, Dad, my bad. Look, sometimes, the worst possible thing happens and it's all we can do to adjust as best as possible without letting it get out of hand. I knew I was going to die, your mother knew it too, but we made sure that you survived. I promise you, for us, that was enough. Naruto felt tears in his eyes as he wrapped up his father in another hug. The surreal experience would be ending soon, as much as he never wanted it to. I love you, son. I know you'll do great things. Say hi to your mother and Kakashi for me. I will. I love you too, Dad. They stayed like that for a few more seconds, a silent acknowledgement that the meeting was over, before his father's chakra finally ran out and the man disappeared in front of him. For maybe a minute or so, Naruto stood there, thinking about everything that had been said. From Hiraishin advice to the challenge, it was clear that he had a lot of training left to do in his immediate future. It was going to be difficult to find time to properly dedicate to it, if there was a lot of fighting upcoming. War had seemed inevitable, and maybe it still was considering that he had already killed Iwa Nin. They would probably not be very happy about that. He opened his eyes to see the very dead body of Ayashi on the floor in front of him, in a puddle of blood, where it seemed that not very much time had passed at all. Still, it had to have been some, because he could hear the sound of many footsteps coming upstairs down the hall. Someone must have heard a commotion. Making a decision, he decided to grab Daisuke's body, now definitely dead, he noted, before leaving. He felt for chakra signatures from the kunai and, disappointingly, felt nothing. Surely Kakashi was on his way back to Kusa by now. Putting more chakra to it, he continued to try to sense something. The footsteps were getting closer rapidly, and he did not want to have to fight his way out. He was not willing to bet that Kusa would believe that their leader attempted to kill him. More likely, they tried to kill on sight. Suddenly, he felt it. A faint chakra pulse, very faint, definitely far away, but he was not sure exactly how far. Had Kakashi moved into range, or had him attempting to use more chakra allow him to feel it from further? Yet more questions. As the door opened, he vanished. The only thing that the Kusanin saw was a yellow flash. He appeared next to Kakashi, who managed to get a hand into a kunai pouch as quickly as Naruto identified that it was in fact him. Looking around, he saw all of Team Hideo. They were eyeing him, carefully, which made sense considering that he was in fact carrying one of their dead comrades with blood on his hands. It wasn't Daisuke's blood, though. Surely they recognized that. What happened to Daisuke? Hideo said, worry and anger evident in his voice. Naruto lay the body on the ground, remaining adrenaline dying off and realizing that he was extremely tired currently thanks to using a, perhaps, overly generous portion of the Kyuubi's chakra. We fought with Iwa Nin around the river and at Kanabi Bridge, then went to report to Ayashi. Things seemed normal, but then, his bodyguards rushed us from behind and injected both of us with some fast-acting poison. Daisuke's was near the heart, and he fell unconscious practically instantly, but mine was in the leg. With Daisuke down, and Ayashi presuming I'd follow shortly, he told us how the Iwa invasion was actually a ruse so that he could get his detractors killed and that Iwa would be thankful enough to support him while he was in power. Yeah, well, if you were poisoned, how are you still alive? It seemed to have turned into mostly anger from Hideo, who seemingly doubted his recounting of events. Uzumaki resilience, he answered, not feeling confident about letting the Kyuubi be known to them. Bullshit. You're behind this. I'm going straight to Yashi-sama and I'll get the real version of events. You Konoha better be out of the country by then. Did Hideo really think that, if he had killed Daisuke, that he would let the man carry through with that? There might be a problem with that. Oh yeah? And what's that? It seemed that the man was now anticipating a fight, and even his genin seemed to have taken up fighting stances. I killed that traitorous bastard before he could do more harm to Kusa and the rest of the world. You killed our leader! Dirty no-good backstabbing. Before he could say another word, he was suddenly dragged into the dirt with only his head remaining above ground. Kakashi popped back up near him, a glint in his eye that would have been enough to scare any genin given the situation. Now, let's all keep our heads clear here. My friend and I shall now be leaving this country while you genin dig up your sensei. If there are any objections to this plan, then I shall kill all of you without a second thought. I'd prefer not to escalate things further than they already have. Oh, and bury your friend. The genin said nothing, but one of them nodded their heads after a moment. Naruto admired their reluctance, given that their sensei had just been incapacitated easily and they were looking at two S-ranked shinobi. After 10 minutes of running with Kakashi, in which Naruto kept up with the man's fast pace despite his body wanting nothing but sleep, the other man broke the silence. My little Naruto, killing a village leader. They grow up so fast. Shut up, sensei. I told you, he betrayed us first. Did you not run into any issues? Iwanin? Nope, all was quiet for us. No Iwanin at all. I suspect that the incursion was planned only at Kanabi and its surroundings, and that Ayashi sent the ninja he wanted dead there. Just your luck that you should, by chance, go with the Jounin that would be on his hit list. Naruto thought back to the moment when Kakashi was picking which sensei to go with, and wondered how his luck could actually be so bad. You know, Naruto, I suggest you start writing your report on this matter as soon as possible. I can only imagine how much of a fuss this little mission of ours is going to cause. Hey, you alright? You're slowing down. Why yeah, I'm fine. It's just that I used the Kyuubi's chakra twice today. And between that and the poison, I think I need some rest. The man sighed before making a shadow clone. I'm still pretty much full on chakra. Hop on its back, my sleepy little student. We can't afford to rest now. Naruto muttered a few curses under his breath but climbed onto the clone's back, resting his head on its shoulders. Oh, sensei, before I forget, I have to tell you something. His eyelids were heavy, even with how uncomfortable the position was combined with the high-speed running, and he let out a yawn. And what is that? The man said, pulling out one of the Ika books he had undoubtedly read hundreds of times. Dad says hi, he said lowly, before drifting off to sleep. The rebuilding of Konoha seemed to have progressed minimally in his absence, although perhaps that was to be expected after being away for only about 3 weeks. He and Kakashi had traveled nearly full speed in order to ensure that no news about their mission would reach Konoha before they did. It was always better to not allow rumors to spread when it comes to matters of such importance. After waking up following a full 7 hours of sleep on the back of his sensei, the man had asked him about his final statement the night before. Naruto had no qualms in explaining everything that had happened to Kakashi and could remember vividly the man's response to Minato's challenge to surpass him by his 22nd birthday. Seems like Sensei finally got in over his head. Currently, he was about to enter the military headquarters alongside Kakashi with his written mission report in hand. This was clearly a matter of extreme importance, involving Konoha's relations with one of their most important allies in addition to Iwa's relations with that ally. As he entered the tent, however, it was clear that something was different. There was more order whereas before it had been chaotic. He was looking around for whomever was in charge, expecting for Shikaku to be sulking in the back, in order to explain the happenings of his mission, when he saw a sight that he had not really been expecting. Ba-chan, he said loudly, without any hesitation. She was sitting near the back on the desk that had once been in use by Shikaku, and her head raised from the paperwork she was doing when she heard his voice. To some extent, he was surprised to not see any indication of anger from his nickname as was her usual reaction. She simply took a deep breath before she smiled, and Naruto realized that she looked as weak as he had ever seen her. Well, at least while conscious. He walked speedily to where she sat, smiling all the way, seeing her return to her duties making him forget momentarily about the troubles and difficulties that undoubtedly lie ahead. Hey Brad, she said, voice slightly softer than usual. It's good to see you again. I've been worried sick. Oh, come on Bachan, you know you don't have to worry about me. You're the one who was out cold all this time. Oh yes, the numerous occasions where you have almost killed yourself fill me with confidence. Besides, a little bit of rest never hurt anyone. So, how did your first mission as a Jounin go? She said with a raised eyebrow. It felt like he was suddenly put on the spot, and she seemed to be expecting for him to say something had gone horribly wrong. Well, the funny thing about that is he didn't really want to give Tsunade the news when she seemed already to be stressed and tired. Her eyes drooped down as her suspicions were proven correct, and Naruto cursed his luck that his first mission as a Jounin would be such a disaster. Oh kid, you age me 10 years every time I see you. How bad is it? Naruto killed the village leader of Kusugakure, his sensei said, causing Naruto to fill with an intense desire to be anywhere else than where he was. Besides Kusa, of course. Can't say I was expecting that, Tsunade said with a sigh, seeming more nonchalant than angry much to his surprise. I'm going to assume that there was a good reason. Yeah? He thought he'd get yelled at then have to explain himself out of the situation. He had 2 of his bodyguards ambush me and a Kusanine, poison us, then admitted that he was working with IWA to have some of his detractors killed and that he thought Konoha was the wrong side to be on. Wanted Kusa to be a top 5 shinobi village and to become a Kage. Hand me your mission report, she said, a defeated look in her eyes. Naruto hesitated for a moment before complying with her. Are you okay, Bachan? I'm fine, just a bit tired from all this makeup work I have to do. Not really fully recovered yet from my nap either. Tsunade barely knew how to respond. From the first moment she woke up, about 5 days ago, her days had been filled with nothing but briefings, council meetings, and mission assignments as well as trying to arrange a diplomatic solution to the rising tensions. Her village, such a strange thought to her to think of it as such, needed to be prepared for war, but right now it was little more than several tons of scaffolding in a crater surrounded by slums of tents. Many clan shinobi were too busy trying to rebuild their compounds to be on active mission duty, and she had to constantly weigh her need for another clan member on a team with the possible political problems that could arise if any of the clans thought that she was slowing them down. In addition to all that, she had to reassure the citizens to have faith in the village's ability to protect them. Actually, you know what, let's take a bit of a walk. Kakashi dismissed. I am sure you'll have a new mission shortly. She walked up, putting on her Hokage robes and hat which he was not actually accustomed to seeing her wear. He knew, however, that she was most likely just trying to promote a sense of pride and to make a statement that the Hokage was no longer inactive to all shinobi and citizens. One day, when he became Hokage, he was going to wear them all the time just as Gigi did. No way he was going to work that hard to get the robes and not have them on. They left the tent, side by side, and she took a breath of fresh air. I really needed an excuse for a short break. Thanks for that, kid. There's something I need to talk to you about. Consider it political training, alright? Sure thing, Bachan. What's on your mind? He finally succeeded in getting an angry eyebrow from the woman for his nickname and smiled, though she seemed to do nothing else in response. Look, I need to be honest with you, Naruto. She used his name. That was probably not good. In the last war, there was not a single village participating that did not suffer greatly. At that time, Konoha stood up and fought against Kumo, IWA, and to some extent Kiri. We were able to hold our own, but it was at incredible costs. Not only did some clans lose over half of their members, the village's alliances were weakened after the prior loss of Yuzushiogakure. We were stretched thin on every front, relying on sheer shinobi willpower to survive, but that can only go so far. If it were not for your father, I have no doubts that we would not have been able to stop IWA. You know, I can still remember it. The constant death, the never-ending missions, coming home after a mission accomplished only to learn that it had not gone so well for your friends or your friend's friend. Instead of mourning, you prepared for the next fight anyway. The only reason that peace was achieved was from pure exhaustion, with every village having been pushed to their limits. Since then, however, IWA and Kumo have had the ability to rebuild themselves mostly uninterrupted. I guess what I'm trying to say is that we're in the worst situation we've ever faced. I think I get what you mean. IWA and Kumo have been relatively quiet since the war, whereas we've had to deal with the Kyuubi attack, Uchiha massacre, Suna/Odo invasion, and Pain attack. Suna's had to deal with the aftermath of that invasion too, which I'd guess was pretty bad for them since Orochimaru probably made sure that they overcommitted to it. Does that sound about right? Yep. And from the sounds of it, I would guess that we're about to lose Kusa as an ally too. There's an important lesson for you in this, kid, one that you need to learn. I know you think that things will be different, but for now, you should assume every alliance to be one of convenience. From first reports on Hashigakure, Kumo is using every excuse in the book to avoid an official declaration of war. Disputing borders, claiming Hoshinin commenced the attacks, claiming Hoshinin have been interrupting trade routes. And they have conveniently faked evidence for all of it. On the bright side, Ayashi probably did not have many people informed about his plans, and their new leader will likely not side with IWA either. Additionally, while I'm not sure which side they take, Kiri is still fresh out of a brutal civil war, so are hopefully a non-factor. We're still trying to figure out where the rest of the minor villages stand. He did not like the sound of things. Tsunade talked as if war was right around the corner, and it looked like Konoha couldn't be in a worse position. The way that things were shaping up, it seemed like it could be Konoha, Suna, AIM, and Taki fighting against Kumo and IWA and any of their possible allies. At this point it felt like unrealistic optimism to expect anything other than fighting in the future, and it looked like it'd be an uphill battle at that. I'll do anything I can to make sure the village gets through this. And I know so many other people will too. That's the power of the will of fire, right? The way we band together in times of hardship, to do things like rebuild and defend our home. She smiled, her burdened spirit lifted slightly from his words. You know, I'm half tempted to just pass the hat on to you now. The smile faded and a renewed look of seriousness defined her features. From what I hear, Danzo feels the same way. Oh, you heard about that, huh? I'm not sure what happened. That was the first time I ever met him. He was feeling a little embarrassed, having to talk with Tsunade about an attempt to replace her with him, even if he had not been the one trying. There was just something so very awkward about it. Look, Naruto, she said, being serious and looking him in the eye, I would not put much trust in Danzo. For as long as I've been in office, he has done nothing but deride my decision-making and attempt to use whatever backchannels he could think of to undermine my authority. From what I've heard, it was the same with Hiruzen. He and the other advisors do certainly offer quite a bit of knowledge and experience, and they are helpful, but they're set in their ways about what a Hokage should be. Before Hiruzen died, the three of them were in disagreement often from what I heard, since, though, it seems they act together, and none of them like me. He decided it would be better not to mention that the man had already voiced his extreme displeasure of her to him. If he's throwing his support behind you, I can only imagine that he has some reason that benefits himself. Right, I'll make sure not to let my guard down around him. He thought back to the way that Danzo had talked in their discussion, to the way the man talked of the Kage with an obvious passion. Maybe it was a bit naive, but he wanted to believe that Danzo truly did want what was best for the village. Still, after the Ayashi incident, he would ensure that he kept his guard up and would not let himself get so caught by surprise again. That's all I ask. I know this message will be lost on you, but be careful, brat. I'll try. He did not really think that being too careful was a possibility in his future, but it didn't hurt to ease the old woman's worries. Caution was never really his style. She did nothing but nod. By the way, I've been thinking about my training. You know pretty much every ninja in the village. Do you know anyone who could help my elemental training? He knew that there had to be a reason the Raisin Shuriken injured him and was not perfectly complete, but asking anyone like Kakashi about it was pointless. Kakashi, though he knew Wind Jutsu, was far from an expert on that particular element. He also did not want Tsunade to know he'd be working on it, since she seemed to believe it was an issue without a solution. Wind users are exceedingly rare here in Konoha, as I'm sure you know. Before Asuma died, he was counted as one of them. Off the top of my head, I can think of only one man with skill enough in the futon element to train you to a skill level appropriate of a Kage level shinobi. And here I thought we had just finished talking about him. She said with a slight chuckle. Does that mean? Yes, Danzo Shimura is probably the most capable futon user in the village. And though I loathe to admit it, he was once quite the skilled shinobi. Of course, what else should be expected from a student of the Nidaime? I have no doubt that he will take a special pleasure in training you, and he will probably try to convert you more closely to his way of thinking. I do not trust him, have not ever trusted him, will never trust him, but if you are trying to learn your element, then he's the best available. The mysteries of Danzo continued to increase. The man who was an advisor to both the third and fifth Hokage, probably even the fourth, and who had invited him to a council meeting despite the two of them having never met, was according to Tsunade his best possible trainer. A man who seemed to despise Tsunade and whom the woman had just finished warning him about. He also would not forget that the man's actions at the council meeting had managed to catch seemingly everyone off guard, including himself. The man was a veteran politician, veteran shinobi, and from what Danzo himself had told him, a self-proclaimed Kage specialist. Maybe, though, he could use the elemental training as a way of unraveling the story behind the figure. I have been thinking about something ever since I was briefed on the escalating situation, and I've made up my mind, she said suddenly, causing him to look over at her with a questioning look. I'm going to call for a Kage summit between all the Kage. Has that ever been done before? Yes, once, during the Shodaime's term. It was when they distributed the tailed beasts, actually. I assure you that what we have documented of that meeting indicates that it did not go all that smoothly. Normally the hard part would be trying to get all the Kage to attend, but we're at an advantage this time. Obviously we've got 2 villages guaranteed in Konoha and Suna, and I strongly believe that the Reikage and Tsuchikage will agree under the pretenses of seeking a diplomatic solution. The Mizukage will probably be intrigued enough to agree as well. All I need is a willing host. You think it will actually accomplish anything? It is unlikely. In fact, it will probably be the very last step before an official declaration of war. All the reports I'm getting make it seem fairly obvious that they are committed, and I'm sure, based off of what you told me of Kusagakure, that I will be even more convinced shortly. Still, it's our best shot and will at least let us see how the Mizukage is reacting to this fiasco. Additionally, I'll be taking an added risk that, well, to be honest, might be a bit silly, but I think it will prove worthwhile. And what's that? He asked, confused by the sudden smirk on her face. You'll be one of my bodyguards. Huh? That confused him. If a large part of the reason that IWA and Kumo were acting this way was due to his learning the Hiraishin and likely assuming he was the son of the Yondaime, as Danzo and Shikaka seemed to suppose, then it seemed like a bad idea for him to be in the same room as them. The Reikage and Tsuchikage are very different people, Naruto. The Reikage is an aggressive man yet surprisingly cunning and well known for his incredible strength. The Tsuchikage, however, is an elderly man whom his entire life has preferred to sit on the side and carefully choose before he involves his village, and these actions from IWA are entirely uncharacteristic of his decision-making. Undoubtedly he is convinced that it would be very dangerous to allow someone who can use the Hiraishin to develop and is acting out because of that, afraid that soon Konoha will have another Minato. After all, as the leader of IWA I have no doubt he must have hated your father. I need to see their reactions to your presence so I can gauge their likely attitudes should it come to war. It is possible that it may just escalate things, but it is hard to believe at this point that it would not happen anyway. We must be willing to take risks. In a war of shinobi any and all information can prove useful. There is also the fact that bringing along a shinobi officially listed in Iwa's bingo book to the summit will send a strong message to the minor villages that we are not afraid and should help to ensure our allies are cooperative. Anyway, we do not know if it will happen yet, but consider yourself off mission duty until I know for sure. They did not say another word. Standing side by side looking at numerous civilians, and Shinobi continued working to bring the village back to its former glory for a few moments before she dismissed him with a rub of the head. He stood there for a while longer, thinking over the events of the day and of the training he would need to ensure he committed himself to shortly. In the coming days he understood that there would be a lot to do and that a lot of people would be relying on him, and he determined to do everything within his power to make sure he would not let them down. Still pondering the events of the day and of the future, he began walking around the city, looking to see its level of rebuilding. "Boss, you're back." His wanderings were interrupted shortly later by the energetic voice of his only student, Konohamaru. Naruto smiled at this. It really had been a bit too long since he had any interaction with the genin. "Yeah, went out on my first mission as a jounin," he said with a grin, causing Konohamaru to become starry-eyed. "You got promoted?" "Ha, well, maybe you've got a head start on me, but I won't be a genin for long, you know. I'm definitely becoming a chunin, sooner rather than later." You think so?" It was always fun goading the kid onward. "Oh yeah, I know it. I took out one of the pains myself." How many of these regular chunin could do that? Naruto gave it a thought. While he was sure there was some element of surprise involved, and Nagato was not really very careful with the paths since he assumed they would be able to always be restored, it was quite an impressive feat, and chances were that most of the chunin may have struggled since they were unlikely to have a jutsu like the Rasengan to use. Well, there's Sakura, Kiba, and Lee. I'm sure any of them could have. Yeah? Well, why didn't they then? Besides, you know they're way above an average chunin. I know. I would bet not many chunin could have done what you did. Plus, there's been talk that there is going to be a lot of fighting soon. I'm going to do my best to make sure I get noticed so I can get a field promotion instead of doing those stupid exams. Like you, huh, boss? It seemed that word of rising tensions, to put it lightly, with Kumo and IWA had probably been leaked to the general populace by someone now. With the village being rebuilt and the Hokage having been absent, that was probably not a very good thing. Despite the attack, there was a certain liveliness in the village as people began rebuilding their homes, and it would be a bad thing to have it interrupted. Don't sound so eager, Konohamaru. There could be tough times ahead for all of us, you know. Where there is fighting there will be death, and I need you to be there to replace me after all. He tried to sound nonchalant about it, but, in reality, he did worry quite a bit about the young genin. Konohamaru was always so enthusiastic that you could count on him to want to charge headfirst into a fight no matter how lopsided it was against him. Very much like himself, now that he thought about it. He shouldn't really judge Konohamaru since either of them liked playing the odds. I know it's dangerous, but well, you didn't get to see yourself fight against pain, boss. Konohamaru said, his voice sounding suddenly a bit more solemn as he became lost in a memory. I'd never seen you like that before. It was awesome. You were moving faster than anyone I've ever seen, appearing and disappearing before I could even tell where you were. You were hitting them with everything you had. Your punches felt like they were echoing through the rubble, and every time you managed to connect another Rasengan, the people around me started to feel hope again. Hope that it was not the end. I couldn't even say anything when you fought the final pain, and used the shadow clones and the Hiraishin to hit him faster than he could push back. You were so focused, boss, like the rest of us were not even there. People are still talking about it all the time. They say that it'll be in the history books. I understand what you mean, Konohamaru. Nothing pushes a shinobi further than a good fight, and my fight with Pain was definitely one of the toughest I've ever had. When I was fighting Pain, I only had one thing on my mind: victory. I knew that I had to defeat him for everyone who had been lost. You want a real fight, something to push yourself to the limit like I've had to. He smiled and put his hand in Konohamaru's hair, ruffling it much to the genin's chagrin. I know how you feel, believe me, I do. And I know you want a really tough opponent, not just some bandit or some guard duty against enemy genin. You just need to prepare yourself for them so you're ready when they do arrive. Do not go looking for them. Got it, kid? Maybe he was being a bit unfair in criticizing Konohamaru for wanting a fight. After all, it would be an absolute lie to say that there was not a part of him that did wonder about the combat ahead, but he could hardly imagine coming home from some mission and finding out that something had happened to the kid. Yeah, come on, you're reading into it too much, boss. I'm just saying that I'm ready to become a chunin and I don't want to take those stupid exams. He probably was thinking about it too much. It seemed lately that he was thinking about everything a lot more than ever had before. It was hard not to feel a little bit burdened by the fact that the elemental nations were on the brink of war so shortly after he had promised Nagato he would find peace. It seemed his world was changing very rapidly, from outcast to hero, and from barely knowing the location of most shinobi villages to being more involved in politics to the point of going along with Tsunade to a possible Kage summit. Yeah, guess you're right. Maybe how fast everything is moving is starting to get to me. Whatever. Anyway, you look like you have some free time. Need any help with your training? Yeah. You gonna teach me Hiraishin? The genin said with a smile that Naruto could not distinguish between being either hopeful or mischievous. In your dreams maybe. I must admit, Uzumaki-san, I am greatly surprised you would seek me for your training. May I ask why you should specifically ask for me? Tsunade Bachan said you were the best winged user for teaching me. You can call me Naruto, by the way. Yes, my apologies. When you've been in my position for so long it becomes almost impossible to drop the formalities, Uzumaki-san. Naruto had Tsunade arrange to have Danzo deliver a message asking for the man to assist in his training at the training ground early in the morning today, and the man had almost immediately returned with a reply in the positive. The mysterious nature of the elderly advisor was something that discomforted Naruto slightly, regardless of how he had been treated thus far. After all, here was someone he had never heard of who was an advisor to several Kage, all while being the most accomplished wind user in the village according to Tsunade. I must admit, I am somewhat surprised she would recommend you to me. I do not believe it a secret that she despises me. Well, she knows that you never supported her getting the position and are not a fan of her, but I suppose she still recognizes your abilities. Fair enough. I would be willing to admit that, though she may not be fit for the position of Hokage, she would be valuable as the head of medic nin and training ninja who may not be suited for other positions. Anyway, forgive me if I strayed away from the point. I am sure you are very busy these days, especially with the Kage summit coming up in the Land of Iron shortly. It was official now, and not really a tightly kept secret, that there would be the second Kage summit in history in a matter of weeks in an effort to lower tensions. It seemed now that all of Konoha was preparing itself for war, even as it rebuilt itself. Priority was now given to any areas that would offer a military advantage, with economic motives taking second place, especially as the market district was mostly rebuilt. Residential life was in shambles, however, and it seemed like it would stay that way for quite a while longer. I guess, but I'm not really going to be doing anything, just standing beside her as a guard. Tsunade had been very clear that he was expected to behave as a guard and only as a guard, not interjecting no matter what was said. His input was going to be his appearance, and nothing more. For some reason, that was not enough to ease his nerves about what the Tsuchikage and Reikage would say about him at the meeting. That is understandable. After all, a Kage summit should truly be between the Kage. However, I do believe her taking you is a strong sign for the village that we will not back down. A very sensible decision, surprising for her, I would say. I would not be shocked if she were taking you for some additional, alternative reason that only she knows. Anyway, allow me to delay no longer. Please describe your issue with Futon. Right. I started learning how to use my wind element not too long ago, before my fight with Kakazu. I really only had one goal in learning it, adding wind chakra to my Rasengan. At first I thought I succeeded, but whenever I use the jutsu it hurts my hand and arm. Tsunade told me not to worry about attempting the jutsu any longer because it could cause permanent damage to my ability to mold chakra. However, I know that there has to be a reason that it is not working. Something that Tsunade and Kakashi missed. So, I would guess then that Tsunade would not know the exact reason you sought my aid? The man developed a very slight smirk on his face that vanished almost as quickly as it developed. Naruto guessed that the man was somewhat happy to know that there was some dissension between him and the Hokage that the elder did not support. She does not know it's about the Raisen Shuriken, he said, somewhat embarrassed that he was keeping it a secret from her, but he knew she would worry about it too much if she knew. He would tell her after he had perfected it, assuming that it was possible. He also suspected that maybe, just maybe, Tsunade did know he was working on it, but based on her prior diagnosis he would have expected her to protest more. Very well, now then, perform the jutsu as much as you are willing. A small part of him was feeling kind of nervous about performing the jutsu due to Tsunade's warning. Sure, it was easy to use it when it felt like a necessity to get something done like destroying the Kanabi Bridge, but this was different. Naruto created a shadow clone who stood beside him as Danzo kept a watchful eye over both of them. With no further hesitation he created a Rasengan in his right hand which his clone began adding wind chakra to as he worked to keep it stable. The power began to build quickly as a roaring sound filled the air. A familiar burning sensation began to stir in his hand, causing him to wince ever so slightly. I believe I have seen enough, the man said, causing Naruto to allow the jutsu to dissipate and for his clone to dispel. You see, there is actually a very simple explanation as to why performing this jutsu would currently be harmful for you. I must admit, I am surprised that neither Kakashi nor Tsunade realized it. Perhaps the unusual nature of shadow clones, or their unfamiliarity with wind chakra misguided them. Tell me, what would happen if one of your clones were to use a jutsu against you, or if you were to substitute in front of one of your own jutsu? Would you be physically harmed by the attack?